Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Good morning. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a little link down there. You can join us in Zoom if you'd like to ask questions, to be part of the conversation. So try it. Anyway, if you're here also as a attendee and you're watching this, let me show you around a little bit. So if you're an attendee and you're looking at the panelists and you're going to watch this, and you may have been watching this for a little while and thinking, those guys, they don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. Well, then join the panel. You just have to get here early enough to do so. Now, we open up the doors at 6 o'clock. I'm not going to promise anything between 6 and 6:30. We're just kind of getting our wits about us. We're drinking our tea, drinking our coffee, and just kind of getting up to speed. So, but you're more than welcome to join. It's usually a relatively fun conversation. 6:30 to 6:40, we release the Discord link. The Discord link is where almost 700 of us keep talking about this all day. And then at between 6:40 and 6:45, we start our mic checks. Once we start the mic checks, that is the panel. So if you want to be on the panel, if you want to contribute to this conversation, we definitely would love to have you. But you need to be here by 6:40. So join us at 6:40. Between 6:40 6:45, we'll start the mic checks. And you just want to make sure you have good internet, good audio, good video, and ready to share your knowledge with all of us. So we'll do that until 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, we start the open questions. This is a general question area for the next hour. So you can ask any questions around media production, and we'll talk about it. So looking forward to your questions. To make it clear, as an attendee, your job is to ask questions. Your job is to vote on questions. As panelists, our job is to talk about them. So you can talk about them too inside the chat, but you as an attendee, you want to be, we really need you. This is a show by all of us. And if you don't do your job, it's a real short show or really boring show. And we said that we might resort to tap dancing, and you don't want to see that. So anyway, so make sure to ask your questions. You've got to have a question back there about media and you just don't understand. This is the time to ask. So anyway, so that's how that works. The second hour is an open hour, or it's a focused hour. So now we talk about different subjects. On Monday, it's kind of open area. This Monday, we're talking about AWS. Last Monday, I don't remember what we were talking about. We were talking about Keynote. It's so long ago, 4 days ago. On Tuesdays, we have audio. Wednesdays, cameras. Thursdays, we have special guests. Today is Thursday. Our special guest is Shaunagh Connaire, and she is going to be talking. She's a journalist out of both Financial Times and Channel 4, and she's going to be talking about her journey and her how she approaches her work and being able to answer your questions around that. So that's Thursday. Friday and Saturday are both dedicated to education, and Saturday is the long day. We'll probably take questions until we run out. So that's kind of our plan. Today there's a third hour at 9 o'clock, which is Memo Live. Oliver Breidenbach will be talking about Memo Live here at 9. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you've been playing with it, we've been sending out the link. We are going to extend it for a month for anybody who signs up this week, because it was supposed to expire this week. So if you sign up this week for Memo Live, it came out in the invite. You can get it for a 30-day period, so you can play with it. Anyway, so that's kind of how it works. Chris, do we have any questions?
For the record, we've never gone short.
I know.
With the questions.
Frankly, I like to scare everybody. I like to scare everybody. Like, we could run short.
And frankly, I'd pay money to watch you tap dance. Anyway, Doug Ferguson
I'm really bad. I have tried. I don't have the shoes,
that's why
I'd
like to see it.
It's horrible. It's like watching a dancing cow. All right.
Doug Ferguson says, Alex, do you use any type of frame synchronizer in your productions, like an AJA FS1 universal frame sync converter or the Leech X75 audio video synchronizer?
We use all of those things. We use we have at once, different reasons. So we do use we have FS4s, FS HDRs, and Tearnexes. So Tearnex is probably the most common for us to use, and that's just a standard format. You can do a lot of different things with the Tearnex, but one of the things that we do is you can remap, bank data. You can also remap all your audio channels, as well as do standards conversions. So you can convert from 1080p to 720p to all these different format changes. And so the Tearnex is a little less expensive, and we use them like chiclets. We just put them in all the time to make those work. The least expensive, by the way, is the Decimator, which many of us have in our bags. So Decimator is $300 or $400, and it does do some of those things, especially standards conversions. Now the scaling won't be quite as nice, and the frame conversion won't be as nice, and the latency is a little higher, but it's a lot less expensive. We use FS4s because we can take 4 inputs in and make conversions to them. The advantage of the FS4 over the or the FS1s or the FS4s over the Teardown is the scaling. No, there's a couple things. One is the scaling is better, so we can do little scale ups of the screen in a way that we can't really do with the Teardown. You can do a lot of audio in. So if we have multiple languages, the FS system is easier to take. There's an analog breakout on the back. You can pop that in. You can bring in eight channels, remap those to your SDI, embed them on the SDI as needed. And also the audio delay, which you can do with the Teardown, is quiet. So if you have to change your audio delay during a show a little bit, you might hear just a little bit of clicking if you do it, but not very much, and it'll generally be silent as you go through the FS system. That's not the case with the Teardown. So the Teardown is you have to find a place and type it in and hit it, because if you start scrolling, it'll be problematic. Anyway, so those are and then the FS HDR we use because when you're doing HDR productions, you need something that's going to be able to do convert between those systems, or specifically tag them properly. Go ahead, Sky.
When and how and why would you have done a live HDR production?
Why would you do it?
Well, I mean, you got so many more crayons in the box, but as a live event, that seems like a lot of extra digits you're trying to shove through a small pipe.
It just depends on what the visual quality of what you're trying to show. So if you think about,
awesome.
If you think about filmmakers, so filmmakers want their show to be seen the way it could be seen if someone has the tools to watch it. And so a lot of these haven't been super public, but you don't want to watch it in 100 nits when you could watch it at 1,000 nits or 4,000 nits. So there's, so you can,
wow.
So there's filmmakers are pretty excited about the idea of HDR. So we're right now it's way more R&D than execution, but it's coming fast. Like it's going to be a thing.
Is 5G going to be the answer for the pipe?
No, HDR isn't that much bigger than SDR. As far as 4K is a lot more. 4K is a big jump up, but if you're just doing HDR, it's not as big of a bump. You're only going from 8-bit to 10-bit. You're using it as you switch over to HEVC. You're basically taking the data that you gave up that you needed more of. The HEVC gives you that back from H.264.
I need to learn that. I need Chris to ask that question. What is HEVC? So Chris will ask that for me.
Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, so I've shot 2 projects on ProRes RAW in HDR, and the biggest advantage I found, I had one shot that I had to do under a freeway overpass, and underneath it was designed with a lot of beautiful artwork. It's kind of a Frida Kahlo type thing, but then I had to shoot the entire overpass, so I got sky. So you're dealing with shadows under the overpass and blown out sky above. When you have an HDR signal, you can mask and bring all of that sky down into a beautiful range and pump up the underpass so that you have a much better balanced picture, and then that gets down res to the SD or the HD signal to send out. So it's very much like shooting raw on a camera.
And we're sending out the actual HDR signal, but and again, when you're capturing on camera, generally you're not capturing HDR, you're capturing log, and log is a different, still a whole different space. So HDR is a subset of that, a much smaller gamut than log itself. So you're actually, it's just if you're taking log, are you going to squash it to HDR or squash it all the way down to SDR? And so, but you're compressing it inside of that. Next question.
The next question is Doug Johnson is saying he wants to know what your predictions are for the Blackmagic event this morning.
We will, by the way, I was going, we're going to run long. And then I realized Oliver's here on Thursday. So this is his, so that's part of the problem. What I'd like to do, by the way, when my schedule, or even if it doesn't have to be me, but our schedules match up, it looks like, I think Blackmagic's going to do this almost every week is my guess. Rather than, and that's not that big of a deal. If you think about Blackmagic at NAB and IBC, they used to release 40 we would get a sheet as a press person of the 40 things that Blackmagic released that week. So all they've figured out how to do is just stretch it out over, just release one a week, or I hope they do that. It'd be kind of fun to have something new from them every week. So I think the most likely thing that we're going to see is a standardization of the switchers. That you've got the Constellation, and then you've got the other ones that all have Teranex inputs. They all have, the newer switchers have Teranex. They have, so that it'll do all the frame conversion that we were talking about in the switcher on the way in. They also have the better keyer. They have, there's a couple things that are all built into it that it's weird right now that the 2ME doesn't have things that a less expensive one has. And then you've got the 1ME, and you've got the, there's a bunch of in the production switcher, but the minis have a better keyer than the production switcher that at $995. All of that just feels very convoluted. So I think that the right thing for them to do, and I don't know what they're going to do, is to get that whole system all set up where it's the same internal guts of processing through all the switchers. And I don't think they have to do a lot more to the switchers to just kind of even that out, because it's a very odd mismatch of feature sets between switchers at the moment. Anyone else have an opinion about it? Does that sound? Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm guessing some. That sounds great, I think, but I'm guessing maybe like a standalone encoder for live streaming and stuff like that. I think that would help bring a lot of the older switchers into the ATEM Mini Pro's streaming features. So they've dipped their feet with that, and I think that maybe we'll get a standalone device, maybe with SDI.
I think I would think it would be more likely that they would just put the streaming into all the new switchers.
I couldn't agree more, but
yeah,
it would be certainly a quick fix.
Yeah, I mean, I think because they've now figured out how to put it into the switcher, and they've figured out all the software pieces, it seems like the next thing to do would be all the switchers now, all the newer switchers, or the ones that they release this week, would have just a 1080p, which would be kind of a very disruptive solution. I didn't think of that until you mentioned it, but I think that could be a possibility. Stuart, and then Chris.
I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest they'll price crash the hardware consoles, like the interfaces. They keep dropping prices on every generation of hardware that comes out, and things like the keyboard, when it launched, was overpriced for editors. So maybe they'll drop the prices of all the consoles.
I think they just released the consoles last week or the week before, so I don't know if they would change them that quickly, but possibly. Chris?
I'd like to see something like an ATEM Mini that lets video go in the background instead of just still images.
Right. Yeah. My bet, I still feel like that what we're going to be dealing with is between the $1,000 range and the $10,000 range, like getting that whole part of that line unified. But they might dig back in, only because the Mini and the Mini Pro are some of the newest on the line. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. All right, next question.
Is there a link to that somewhere?
Sean,
I think you just go to their website. It's there. The link to YouTube is on their website, and it'll start at 9. Go ahead. And obviously, when you come in tomorrow morning early, we're not going to talk about it until 7 o'clock. That's the thing. So 7 o'clock tomorrow, we will start the hour discussing whatever happened, but we won't talk about it at 6.
It's recorded. You're going to be joining Oliver at the time.
Yes.
And then watch the recording later.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next question.
John Preto says, excuse me, I watched the Zoom broadcast yesterday. It was poorly produced. Zoom standardized on their virtual backgrounds with the same image. The keyer was bubbling like crazy and was very distracting. How do you persuade the client not to use their inferior feature for their own productions?
I don't know how you persuade a client to not use their own feature. It's unfortunate. I did check in on that a little bit, and I was underwhelmed. Underwhelmed in a whole bunch of places. We're trying to do best practices, and then we had, some of the worst slides I had ever seen. On some of the one, at least the one I turned in, it was unreadable. Like the slides were unreadable, and this is a person telling teachers how to do this. It's just the exact opposite of what we've been talking about. So yeah, I was not super. At least the parts that I saw, I didn't see all of it. I watched enough. I watched 10 or 15 minutes, and then watched another 10 or 15 minutes, and was just like, oh, okay. And the hard part is that, and again, it's a lot about pedagogy and structure and everything else. But again, the fundamental ball handling skills of producing a good event was missed, and I think that we have to get those basic ball handling skills sorted before we start talking about all the other more complicated things, because those other complicated things don't work without ball handling skills. You can't do a flea flicker, you can't do a trick play, you can't do any of those things if you can't handle the ball.
You can't hold the ball.
You can't you can't hold the ball, like you can't do any of those things. So there's no reason to, in my opinion, and I know that I keep on coming back, there's no reason to talk about anything else in education until teachers understand how to look and sound okay, and how to actually produce slides that are readable, and how to put those videos together and where to leverage those videos. But we keep on wanting to talk about the other things because we know how to talk about those, and we don't understand how to do the other pieces. And again, I think that someone needs to talk about that stuff, but we got to handle the basic skills, because looking horrible on video and then putting up bad slides is not the way that I would put my best foot forward. Chris, and then Jeffrey, and Fenwick, and then Jeffrey, and then Leland, and then Steve.
I dropped in just for
Quickly.
the briefest, as much as I could bear, but I did see something very interesting. They had a point where one roundtable was finishing, and they had to go to the second round, another roundtable, and you could tell that they were using some outboard gear besides just Zoom. They did a nice little digital wipe to a slide that said, "Here are the people coming up next." And you could tell somebody was frantically like shutting off cameras and turning on the new cameras for the next meeting underneath that slide. And it made me think about, oh, this is good. They're experiencing a real life production issue. Whereas hopefully they'll look at that and go, oh, we should have a way of dealing with this within our software and not have to depend on outboard production gear. And I think that those little
and you can do that in a
points.
webinar platform. We oftentimes will pop a slide up and then turn all the panelists on, and then open, and then come right back to them. I don't know if they needed to have outboard hardware to do that.
How would you do that?
Well, if you're in the webinar platform right now, for the webinar viewers, when all they see is the screen that we give them, you have a bunch of people talking back and forth, and then you cut to a slide that you inject as the operator, and you spotlight it. And once you spotlight it, that's all they're going to see. And then you turn everybody's cameras on. We do this on every event we do. So there's a slide up, and then you turn on, turn on. And what you're doing is you're basically, for us, we're bringing them in. The main thing you have to have is you have to kind of train the other folks. If you're going to ever use the grid, you have to tell the other folks not to turn their camera on until we go to the slide, because otherwise they'll show up in the grid, automatically. But webinar only shows people who have active cameras on. So if the next group has their cameras off, they're already loaded in, and you just go to a slide, you get them to unlink it. It's hard because the real issue is that you don't have any comms, for that. So there's no way to talk back to them and say, okay, turn on your camera, and so that's why for a lot of our higher end events, we want point-to-point connections, even if it's over Zoom, where we can now tie our comms into the system so we can talk to them all.
And when you're turning on the slide, is that a screen share?
No, what I use, the easiest way, this gets back into Memo Live. It's number one reason I use Memo Live is that I use Memo Live as that video, and I just put slides in there, or I have videos or whatever, and I just pop it in, and it just fills the screen. I prefer not to use screen share because it'll change the whole state for everybody. So that's actually the easiest way to do it is Memo Live. ManyCam will do it. I think Ecamm will do it. There's lots of different tools that will produce that result where you're showing up as a virtual camera, and Zoom probably supports virtual cameras better than any other platform. After a hard May, it's much easier to do it with Zoom than anything else. And so you have a virtual camera. That virtual camera then pumps in. It can be videos. It can be stills. All those things can be pumped into the Zoom frame, automatically. Okay, Jeffrey.
I just want to know which one you're talking. This isn't the Washington D.C. thing.
No, it was the education.
Else,
there was an education Zoom that was yesterday. I think it's today too. It might be today, but there was an education summit yesterday.
It's called the Zoom Academy that Idelson shared yesterday. So
yeah,
and you can drop my comment because I was just going to probably tear it apart anyway.
Okay. Stephen Kimbrough, you were going to say something, and then Bill, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, some teachers who watched that said we do a better job than they did. They knew all the errors that they made in the Zoom meeting, so they felt good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I guess if you want to feel like you're, like everybody else, I guess you could do that. But I felt like they could have, had a slightly higher standard. Doesn't have to be a crazy production, but slightly higher standard would be great. Bill?
In editing language 101, that's simply called a cutaway to cover a jump cut. That's when
Yep.
you go to something solid to mask some bad thing happening in the background.
Well, it's not even, and for us that typically if everyone's been trained and set up for it, that transition can be seconds. Like we put up that frame and it can be 10 or 15 seconds, we're back, and what's even better is if you can throw up a video, because you push a video into it and then there's a transition of a minute or 2 minutes, and it's just seen as part of the production. And when you come back to it, you're with a whole new group. Sky, really quickly.
I ended up watching the SMPTE behind the scenes for Late Show and Late Show, and that was very interesting. So I missed the Zoom thing, but I learned a lot about learning how to produce out of your garage in Los Angeles and your living room, said to Stephen Colbert. So that was pretty fascinating.
I hope it's recorded. I didn't have time to watch it.
It was very valuable. Pretty tight scenes. The engineering, so he didn't have a lot of the technical. I mean, he had all the technical knowledge, but yeah, everybody's working from home. Stephen Colbert's wife is the camera operator and the producer, and it's just the two of them.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I put some of the slides up in Discord, just so you know.
Oh, good.
Tom Wineland says, what is what is the workflow that you guys use in recording your shows with the ATEM Mini Pro in the workflow, and what drives are you using, and what drives are you using?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I use this Samsung T5 1 terabyte for everything, and I use it to edit as well. So it goes straight into the ATEM Mini Pro, and I can just put it straight on my computer, and I'm not looking around for other drives to see where I left that show and where I left that footage. So basically everything goes on here, and then I back it up and move it over time.
Yeah, the Samsung T5 is pretty much the standard for all of us that are recording. I think that's from our cameras, from the Mini, etc. That's been the one that, sorry, is pretty much the standard. Go ahead, Victor.
I also use the T5, but they're getting harder to find because it's been replaced with the T7. And I personally have not tried the T7. I've seen some posts on the ATEM group that there's been some issues with Blackmagic and T7. So if anyone has, please let us know.
Sky, you use that for out of your ATEM Mini? Nope, we can't hear you.
Correct.
Yep.
And it just goes straight in USB-C.
Yeah, and these T5s are pretty inexpensive. So they're but any drive, I think, that's USB-C. Go ahead, Chris, really quickly.
Yeah, I've got 6 of those, and what we do is we shoot on that, we edit on that T5 drive until the project's done, and then we dump it. We don't even port the video over to the camera. We just edit on there.
Right.
Yep. They don't get hot?
No, I really haven't had an issue with them. Yep. Next question.
Sound Mixer SF Jesse says, has anyone used QIQO, don't know what that is, chat, a Zoom meeting wrapper? And if so, did it provide stable performance, video and audio signals, and a meaningful expansion in interactivity when compared with a standard Zoom meeting?
I haven't used it.
That?
I have no idea. I haven't used it. I did look at it after you posted that in Discord, and I guess the only thing I'd say is that it feels very it's got like lots of really big things. It does look like it has some interesting things as far as agendas, maps. There's a bunch of things that it seems to be able to incorporate well. So I mean, it may work. When I see things that are really super visual with big images and big stuff, I just feel like that's not built for scale. Like you just have to be very careful of when things are overly designed with too many things. I feel like, well, that's good for a certain number of people, just not good for a lot of people. So and for a couple hundred, it might work fine. So but I haven't gotten to use it yet. Next question. I don't think anybody else. Oh, Leland, have you used it?
I was just going to recommend the fact that whenever you go to a website providing a service that's using the free WordPress.com as their base location for HQ, I would be wary. So just watch for stuff.
They
like
have been
that
around
when
since they have been around since 2015, but yeah, I think that they were probably an edge case until recently, and so they're probably trying to take advantage of the wave. Next question.
That's a good comment, Leland. When using a plain background like I'm using now, Victor says, would you prefer a bigger millimeter lens with the camera further away from the subject, or a smaller millimeter lens with the camera closer to the subject?
Generally, I want to move the camera a little away from me because it gets to be a more normal aspect ratio. As the camera gets closer and as the focal length opens, you're going to start to distort your face, and so you tend to look more flat as that camera starts to back up. Bill and then Chris.
Yeah, there's a couple of places on the web where if you look for a lens comparison, they will have the same exact framing of somebody, and they will shoot it with everything from like a 12 millimeter all the way up to a huge telephoto 400 millimeter, all of them pushed in to have the same face. And you can watch as you cycle through them, how it distorts the image and get a sense of what lenses do.
Yeah, Chris and then Mickey.
I'd like to yield my time to Bill because I was going to say the same thing.
Exactly same thing.
Okay, there you go. All right, but I would tend to try to move. I mean, for me, I try to have my camera that I'm on a webcam about 3 or 4 feet away, rather than right in front of me. And so I try to use a lens that can get me 3 to 4 feet from me. And I find that that's a pretty natural distortion, from otherwise.
And you're at f4, is that correct, Alex?
I don't know. I'd have to go look, but I think I might be at 2.8. It doesn't really matter with the background the way it is, as long as it's bright enough. Yeah, well, but
the depth of field is the question.
But for this, it doesn't matter. With a solid background, I don't think it matters much. But I have it opened as far as I can because I'm trying to get as much light into the camera as possible. So yeah, go ahead, Leland.
I was just going to mention it's kind of the same principle that I use even on a webcam. If I were to reset my focal view here, this is actually the camera's view when I turn it on. So I bring it in by positioning that through vMix, framing myself into the window and getting a bit of a zoom. So my camera's about 3.5 feet away.
And your audio is still breaking up a little bit. All right, next question.
All right.
Victor says, how do we determine what temperature in Kelvin to put our key lights? Is this based on things like skin tone, or is it used to create a mood?
Bill?
To create a look, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so basically, Kelvin is really important when you're trying to match mixed light. So if you have a window somewhere that's throwing light on you, that's going to be a high Kelvin temperature, 6,000, 8,000, sometimes 10,000. If you have tungsten lights on in a room, that's going to be a low value, maybe 3,200 Kelvin is traditional tungsten lighting. So if you have something else in the image, you want to make sure that you match that. What you don't want is mixed lighting, because you get that weird thing of the faces correctly, but there's a big, either very blue, or if you do it the other way, a very orangey shadow. So it doesn't really matter, I don't think, the color temperature, as long as it's consistent across the whole of what you're presenting.
Yeah, and a lot of times you're taking into account windows or lights. Lights are at 32, windows are at 56, roughly. If it's cloudy, it might be closer to 6,000. If it's, so there's a bunch of different things that can happen there from a color perspective, but you're just trying to match. It's more important to, you're just trying to match the colors that are around you as far as that goes. But it's not a specific mood as much as just getting it right, because you'll do the mood and the shading of your camera. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather says, Zoom experts, is there an option in Zoom to pause Windows updates?
Colin?
Windows Update on Home Edition didn't used to be a pausable thing. I think in the most recent releases, it is. You can pause for up to 7 days. So if you've got an event, for example, what you're going to want to do is update your environment, test everything, and then turn off Windows Update for the 7 days through the event, assuming you have a multi-day event, and that will solve your problem. But there's no way to do it permanently, and you probably don't want to do it permanently because you may forget to turn it back on. And that's Microsoft's logic for not letting you do it permanently.
So evil. Sorry, just from a production perspective, it's just the most evil thing. That's all I have to say. Jeffrey?
I'm actually going to dispute Colin there because I know that there is a way to disable it, but it's going to be really tricky. And the reason why you disable
you can go
it,
into
the reason why you disable, let me finish,
You
let me
don't want
finish,
to do
Colin.
it.
The reason why you disable it is for things like any type of legacy equipment or anything. If you're building a box or something like that, you don't want to have updates run because people can't get to the back end. But yeah, it's going to be really tricky to do. So you might want to refer to Microsoft's documentation on that. Just search on the web, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
I think it's probably
there are registry editor ways of doing it, but it's not a recommended thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's the thing I like the least about Windows. Leland and then Stuart.
The question was actually framed as to whether Zoom had that capability to pause the Windows update. And I think Stuart brought that question on because vMix has the capability of pausing the Windows update when you're broadcasting with it. So I don't believe Zoom has that feature capability whatsoever. Could be something to ask Zoom if that's a possibility to keep interruptions of Windows updates from taking place during live broadcasts. That's what I think his concern is. So I would have to say go to the IT department at Zoom.
And to Brian Farkas's comment, is Pro able to pause it indefinitely? No. Okay,
Almost certainly.
Now without doing some registry hacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chris?
I'm chatting with Grant on the side here, and he says that Zoom Rooms does have that feature, the ability to pause updates.
Okay, there you go.
He's so smart.
Go ahead, Stuart, real quick.
Yeah, I've gone through services, registry hack, task scheduler, and it's insipid. And Windows 10 Pro, it just keeps turning itself back on.
Yeah.
So wrong. Anyway, all right, next question.
Yeah, I like to drive the car. I don't really like getting under the hood. One for probably Colin and Guy. I have a dual boot Linux and Windows PC plugged into the ATEM Mini. When it boots, I don't get to see the grub menu. So can't choose. Do I need to put some graphics into the grub menu so I can the menu and choose? Please proofread these. So I can the menu and choose between Linux default and Windows 10.
So there are a couple of different ways to do this. My approach, I mean, if you're dealing with a server, you typically push the grub menu out through serial port because you're SSHing into the server and not worrying, and because you're dealing with something headless. This is a production scenario where I gather he's trying to capture the experience of booting the machine and record it or stream it through the ATEM. So one thing you want to do is make sure the ATEM is connected to the built-in video output and not a secondary card, because the grub display is almost certainly going to be going through the built-in video output unless you have the ability to swap that in BIOS. Now, the other thing is, yes, there is a way to enable a video mode for grub, and that method is the grub video backend parameter in the grub config file. That will do it. There are other ways of introducing backgrounds and other things into the grub menu to make it look cooler. And a lot of the distributions out there do that just to brand the thing and so on. So you can do any number of things, but check out grub-mk-config. That will provide you a sample configuration with all the various configuration parameters that'll let you do that kind of thing.
And that wins for the geekiest question and answer for the hour. All right, next question. There's still some time left. Anyway, here, next question.
Okay, let me answer the next one. I actually really like this one. Brian Enright says, I've been using VLC to convert old WMVs and AVI files to MP4 files. Does the panel have a better suggestion?
Go ahead, Colin.
There are two of them. There's Handbrake, which is popular, I'm sure, among the panel, and the other one on Mac is Video Stream Clip, which does less transcoding and doesn't mess up your compression quite as much.
And if you MPEG stream clip.
MPEG, thank you. Yes, MPEG stream clip. Yeah.
Right,
but also give you somewhat less control.
And you can theoretically, with some scripting, use just FFmpeg as well. If you,
Oh, sure, but
I mean,
that there you go. Nerdiest answer.
it's not the nerdiest. It's just I'm just trying to keep it. Just remember that Handbrake is just a front end for FFmpeg. So as many, so is the TriCaster streaming. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Handbrake do a little bit more than that though at this point.
I don't know. They might now.
Handbrake is open source, so I think a lot of people patch into it.
Well, FFmpeg is open source, so everyone patches into it. That's why you saw all the same filters on OBS and on vMix and on TriCaster. They all just patched into those filters for the longest time.
Go ahead, Chris.
There's another one which also may be a front end to FFmpeg that I've been using for a long time. It's called Any Video Converter HD. It was on the App Store. And we used it when we were still outputting WMVs for clients. It's got a kind of a funky user interface, but very fast, and it's pretty cool. And I think it'll go both ways.
Cool. Next question.
I had to close that. Oh, wow. All right. Sorry. I have to manage these better. Kevin McCardle says, for a newbie, green screen studio, what is the least amount of devices necessary? Right now, we are at 2 Macs and 1 PC, but wondering what works well with less machines, as it seems there is a fine balance. Might try Aaron Parecki's type of setup.
Well, I guess the question is this a live key or is it a post key? Because a post key, you just need a computer, because you're just going to record green screen on your camera and do it. So we'll assume that it's live. The least amount of equipment for a live key would be the ATEM Mini. Just to pass it through there and let it pull the key for you. It's going to do better than most of the other ones that are out there as far as live keys go. As far as good key, most of the software that you have there, whether it's Wirecast or Mimo Live or OBS, will all have some kind of keyer, but most of them are chroma keyers, which are substandard. And it wouldn't be hard, by the way, and we've told people in those companies that it wouldn't be hard to build a relatively simple linear keyer. Somehow it just doesn't get through that. It wouldn't be hard to do that. Like, the math is not difficult. So they just read some paper on chroma keying and put it in and haven't updated it since. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just think some of the struggles that people have is that they're shooting on not substandard, but they're shooting on cameras that have really coarse rasters, or their lighting is terrible, and they're trying to pull a magic key out of it. And so all of the formula pieces, if you put too much salt in any recipe, it's going to mess it up. If you put too little resolution into any good keyer, it's still going to mess it up.
But you can get a lot. You can do better than what these keyers are doing. So I don't have any. The software ones have been a little rough from the live keying perspective. The only one that I will selfishly say worked really well was Pixel Conduit, because we built it and you could do a nodal composite. So you could build your own unspill, you have unspills and keys and all the things you needed to do live, but I don't think it's running 64-bit. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing to note, upcoming Wirecast 3.2 is actually revamped their chroma key section, so you can actually do alpha key, white key, black key to really tune in the color.
It'll be interesting to see if they put in a linear processor as opposed to chroma key. Because
is there beta out there yet or not for 3.2?
Yeah, it's on second beta right now. Just go to their forums and you'll find it. I can also send you a link too.
Yeah.
I'll grab it. Thanks.
Next question.
Doug Johnson says, what streaming encoders are you using for HDR? You brought it up.
The two major ones that you would use would be Elementals and ATEM. And ATEM is not the ATEM. I know this all gets very complicated. ATEM is ATEM. Are the two that are probably, and they're not. These aren't little encoders. These are big encoders. so they're there's a bunch of software in the guts that have to be there to do it properly. So it's a different class of encoders to do those things. So but those are the two that I know of that will execute that stream. I mean, technically anything will execute the stream that can do a 10-bit encode. If it can do a 10-bit HEVC encode, it just needs to tag it on the way out that says, hey, what you're getting is HLG, for instance, is really easy. HDR10 is relatively easy. it's a different compression of that brightness, and then it has to be tagged, hey, I'm HDR10 or HLG. So a lot of encoders that would be capable of HEVC 10-bit would be able to do it. There's just not a lot of them out there outside of the hardware encoders that do that right now, because there's not a strong demand for it in the industry yet. Next question.
Hillary House says, is there any research on what production values can prevent or overcome zoom fatigue or screen fatigue?
Audio.
Well, research. I know that's your opinion. More text graphics like news shows, 3D backgrounds, animated backgrounds. It's a good question, the actual research, because one of the things I'm finding is that when you're pitching ideas to like big companies, they love to just say, well, this paper says, or this research, or these, this, Johns Hopkins, study or something like that. Do you know of any like actual research on?
No, I'm only on these calls 10 to 12 hours a day.
Oh, I know.
So
Maybe
I
you
don't
could write the paper.
I think I'm not going to write the paper. I'm just going to tell everyone I know exactly what it is, because I've been doing this for the last decade. So I don't have to write a paper for them. I can just tell them that bad audio and bad video make people tired. Like it's just, like bad framing, bad audio, bad video. It's not any more complicated than that. We're sitting here for 3 hours every morning, and I feel oftentimes more energetic at the end of this than I did before, and I can go into a 20-minute call with someone with a speakerphone, and I can be tired by the, 10 minutes in. I
last 10 minutes.
What?
You last 10 minutes?
I get droopy eyed after like 5 minutes. I just know that it's going to be a bad day. And so I think that, we just have to be conscious of it, of that good audio. And I would still say good audio is more important, because it just requires you to do a whole bunch of processing that every time someone talks, to understand them, you can always look down and not listen to them. Not look at them. But to hear what they're saying in a meeting, I just feel like so much of Zoom fatigue is audio, bad audio. Bill, and then Colin.
I'm just going to nod down to Mickey, because people don't realize that Mickey is paying attention to what we're doing, and he is switching back and forth to people and things like that. So editing always keeps your interest up.
It does. But it doesn't affect us. What I'm saying is like when Mickey's job is integral to the folks that are watching the webinar and to YouTube, because otherwise it would be very boring for them, because they're not interacting with it. But when you're in a meeting like this, where you're looking at a grid and you have a bunch of people interactively talking back and forth, bad audio is just devastating, to it. And it's the first thing that the first thing that we do is we try to fix the audio. Go ahead, Colin.
It's worth taking a moment to think about backgrounds too. And I want to take the moment to circle back to the first question we were talking about, or the question where we were talking about the Zoom education meeting. They were dog fooding with their backgrounds, which is, one, extremely distracting, two, not executed very well, but more importantly to this question, extremely distracting.
Yeah.
Dog fooding is great if you can promote your product. You want to show a product that actually enhances the experience. And their experience they were trying to promote was using it for education. You don't want to distract the participants with crazy backgrounds, animated backgrounds, which was one of the things, 3D backgrounds, which was posed in the question. All bad ideas, I think.
Oversized raindrops. Bad idea. Bad.
Well, no, that was fun because it irritated the hell out of Alex for a couple weeks. But
Alex, you probably should
see how I've adjusted my goals here.
Yeah. I remember getting trained early on of just when I was speaking, and I had a crazy haircut, and I had a lot of other. I had a leather jacket and with all kinds of ornament on it, and so on and so forth. And I was trying to talk, and I had to shift into a different industry from where I was. And the first meeting, the person who was training me just said, the question is, do you want people to listen to how you look or what you're saying? And you just got to decide what that is. And so I very quickly cut my hair and cleaned all up. And then people were listening to what I was saying and not how I looked. And so I learned pretty quickly to get that out of the way. And so I think about that a lot when I'm thinking about backgrounds, and what I'm doing is I just want to be heard clearly and seen clearly. Maybe there's things that I want to say in that background, but not often. Go ahead, Chris.
Did you say that right? Do you want people to listen to how you look? Is that how they?
Yes, if you
That's what
look
he said.
outrageous, people will
Good.
listen to how you
They're
look.
not hearing anything you're
Clever.
saying. They're
Got
just
it.
they're
I
just
get it.
hearing
Yeah.
they're just hearing
Just
that
wanted to make
you
sure I heard
look a
that
certain
right.
way. Yep,
Hey,
absolutely.
Alex,
Next
you
one.
might want to explain dog fooding. There are probably a lot of people watching who don't understand each.
Just use your own product. We're dog fooding right now. A perfect example is the Q&A system and the chat system that you're using is us dog fooding or fish fooding, depending on the company that you're working with. It's fish fooding or dog fooding our own product, and it's a pretty important piece. And most large companies that are building their own products are dog fooding or fish fooding all the time.
And so the extension of the term is eating your own dog food. That is,
Yeah.
is your product good enough for that you would consume it yourself?
And the ultimate version of that would be Apple's Keynote, which was internally built and only there to serve Steve Jobs for a long time, and then to serve folks in the company, and then to finally be released. That's the kind of the ultimate version. Next question.
Next question is Ken Jones says, on my live church Facebook feed, 3 cameras, ATEM Mini, OBS, MacBook Air, I changed the resolution from 720 to 360 to stop video frame loss on air. That worked, but my sync was hosed. I thought sync delay was experienced in the camera. Looks like OBS plays too. How many sources of sync delay are there?
Every time it goes through a video process, there's a delay in the video.
How many sources do you want to add?
Right. It's like every box has, if you're doing anything other than passing it through that box, and even if you're passing it through that box, every box is going to delay it by a millisecond or 10 milliseconds or 25 milliseconds or 1,000 milliseconds or whatever that is. Typically, and we went through this for a while and they all changed. And so that we had and we may do this again soon because I think we're going to get access to it, but we had a validate and we would just run it through we would run the test signal through every piece of equipment. And then I could generally tell you, we could do the math where we could say, this is all going to be 68 milliseconds. We weren't always right, but every piece of equipment is going to add delay, and definitely scaling. Scaling is a big operation, and it's going to delay it by, it could delay a scaling operation, especially in software on your computer, probably delays at 5 to 7 frames. It's going to take some time for it to process that. Chris, and then Sky.
Yeah, so in our industry, we refer to that as leak points. So every time you add a connection to a hose, it's going to leak at that spot.
Yep, absolutely.
So would you compress before so between the camera and the laptop, would you throw a compression in between? A
delay?
No, compression. I've got a Magewell box. I'm coming straight out of my camera, going right into my vMix and letting my vMix do my compression.
You can delay the audio, out of the mixer. It doesn't really matter where you do that with the audio. The main thing is that you just need to be watching the end product when you figure out your delay. So you just need to and the way I do it is, if I'm streaming to YouTube, I stream it out to YouTube and I look at it.
Yes.
And if I'm doing an HLS, I will actually grab the segments off of the encoder and take them into Final Cut and look at them to see if they're right. But you want to get it at the very end of that product because it's all this other stuff that's happening, and you want to look at it at the very, very end where it's going to go out and make sure that your delay is matched. Jesse, and then Jeffrey.
But to Ken's point, I feel his pain. I'd love to talk with him because I'm struggling with the same thing going to YouTube. So let's talk, Ken.
Just wanted to add, as much as it's possible, it's helpful to break out the individuals that are coming in remotely and apply a unique delay for each person if possible, listening to the end product, which is the stream.
Yep. Yeah, if you can do point to points to everyone, that will fix that, or you can fix it to some degree. We've had ones that Jesse's actually worked on where someone's coming in 5 or 6. I was looking at it and I was looking at it in the stream and I thought that it had just corrected itself, and I didn't realize that Jesse had gone and corrected it for me. So you can definitely clean a lot of that stuff up by doing individual hits. So go ahead, Jeffrey.
Paul Richards, who's with PTZ Optics, and they have a show called Stream Geeks. They actually have a tool for OBS to fix a lot of the audio sync issues. So you might want to check that out. I'm trying to find the link.
Great. Next question.
Esborn Larson says, when can we have Alex's teardown of his telestrator solution? I'm sorry to nag. I'm just so curious. It's torn down. It's quite literally torn down right now, isn't it?
It's torn down right now. I can't tear it down for you because it's all torn down. We're in a huge transition at our office where we've taken over 4 more offices, and we have to support 3 different kinds of shows at the same time. And so what was in my kit at my house is now just a pile of wires until we get all the pieces in place. And I keep on thinking it's going to be this week, and then it's the next week, and then it's the next week. But the due dates on all of the things are August 10th. So by August 10th, I'll have it back up. So sometime that week we can probably talk about the telestrator. But right now, all my hardware is spoken for while we try to keep everything glued, try to keep the ship glued together while we're making the transition. There's lots of wires going everywhere right now. Anyway, next question.
Before I ask the next question, I want to point out that the Zoom event yesterday was actually broadcasting in 1920 1080, and it still looked horrible. How do you? So Edward DeSantis says, how to force Zoom. It could have looked good. I mean, our 720 shows it looked better. Anyway, how to force Zoom to send higher resolution. I have HD set up and still can't get better than 640 on the send for video. Is Guy here?
Well, yeah, Guy might have joined. I think usually there's DV Store Conference Room 1 is in here. So, and Guy might be here as well. But so what we've learned is that if a Zoom room joins your event, it'll force everybody to 720. Now, it won't do it for the webinar as far as the output goes, but everyone here and the YouTube event will be forced to 720 if there's one Zoom room in the system. So the other one that John Edelson pointed out was that if you do a point-to-point with one person, that will be, and using a business account, you'll also get 720. And then you can make requests to go to 1080 and so on and so forth. But Guy graciously has his Zoom room join this meeting every morning. So ours is always at 720 now because of that one Zoom room that's involved. Thank you, Guy. So anyway, so that's generally how you force
office hours.
Yeah, that's how you force it forward. Next question.
I forgot to hit the answered button. Sorry. Victor says, when bringing in audio via HDMI from a second computer to an ATEM Mini, will the audio be as good in quality as if the audio was coming from an audio interface from the second computer?
Mickey?
I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe HDMI can carry up to 96 kilohertz. So if your audio is at 24-bit 96 kilohertz or below, then it will be the same as the source since it's a digital connection.
Okay, so it's not adding any compression or any kind of artifacts or anything like that. Awesome, thank you.
Next question.
Answer.
I do believe that will go to 192 for you though, Victor, if you're playing out that high.
Next question.
Butterfly, Rachel, and Clifton says, on making our own music, Genius Home Studio, GarageBand, or maybe Victor could run through his board of choice. Thank you.
Victor, what's your board of choice?
Well, it really depends on the situation. I mean, for what I'm doing here at home, I have a very small Mackie that takes care of business, but it's going to be completely different if I'm going to be doing a project at a studio. Then I want to take advantage of the preamps and so on of a good professional board at a studio, which is way above my price range. So it is one of those it depends answers. I can give you a general sense that the Allen Heath or the Mackies, generally speaking, would be good enough to do multi-channel recording.
Great. Jeffrey, real quick, we're running out of time.
I agree a lot with Victor. The biggest thing is what type of music you're recording. If you're doing instrument recording, that's one thing. If you're just bringing in digital samples, that's another thing. If the board can handle that type of stuff, those are the things you need to think about.
Next question.
Sky says, has anyone used cinebody.com for capturing group event? What does it do, Sky?
Go ahead, Sky.
Apparently, it's an iPhone capture that sends it up to a server somehow, and then you own all of the different perspectives, and then you can edit from all of those live
There's a couple different services that are doing this. Cinebody's one of them. I haven't used Cinebody. Make.tv is another one that is doing kind of a similar thing as far as, production in the cloud, so to speak, as far as live production in the cloud. I don't think any of us have used this one.
I was told a nonprofit is using that at their live events so they can get multiple perspectives, and then they have all of the content without all of the photo camera guys out in the field.
It's coming.
So what you're saying is multiple people at an event can just log onto this thing, shoot whatever they want, and it all goes to a centralized place for
And
post?
is it doing that live or is it doing for post?
Just post, from what I understand, and that's why I'm asking, because I was just introduced to it yesterday, and it's like, what is this?
That seems cool.
Yeah, it could be.
I would try that.
$500 a month. $500 a month.
Yeah.
So
it's cheaper than hiring a bunch of camera people.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you could get them, there's a bunch of things that you want to do with that. There's another company that's doing the capture where the director can talk to you while you're capturing. And I can't
OpenReel.
OpenReel. So OpenReel is the super expensive one, but when you're doing an interview with a phone, they have a talk back and everything else. And so they really can, if they want to produce something remotely with a phone, OpenReel gives them kind of more access. And then again, Make TV is really more designed around live, and also live integration and
it'd be fun at like a music event or a small club thing. Just get all your friends, fire up their phones, and
next
then
question.
You can go home and be a nerd. Next one, Ernest Floyd says, I'm purchasing a Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema 4K. What starter lens do you recommend that I should purchase?
It's so complicated. Go ahead, Sky.
The Sigma art lens, what is it, 18 to 32? That's what Guy Cochran sold me. I took it to Europe immediately. It gives me just enough. It's got great depth of field, but it's portable and small. You do have to get the thing between the lens and the. What's that?
I think the first one that I got for mine was the Zuko
Metabones.
14 to 42, which was similar frame, but it's a micro four thirds. Glass is really good. It's fast lens. It worked really well. Bill and then Chris, but 15 seconds each. We're almost to the top of the hour.
Sure. The answer, I think, for any lens purchase is what are you going to shoot? I mean, if you're doing talking people in the front of an auditorium or something similar, you need to shoot from 35 feet away. Then a 16 to 35 is not going to do you much good.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the job first, and then match the lens to the job.
Chris? Oh, can't hear you. Still can't hear you. You gotta mute on top of the mute. All right. Okay. We're out of time for this one. What I would say is get something basic and then rent because you can always rent and see what you feel like, because renting is cheap. Remember, it's like $10 a month or $10 a week or $20 a week per lens. Rent a couple lenses, take it out, see what you use the most, and then buy something.
Lens Pro to go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now we're going to shift gears to our more focused hour. So thanks everybody. And we're here. I'm going to introduce Shaunagh Connaire. Hi, Shaunagh. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, Alex. How are you?
Good to see you. I think Shaunagh and I met in Davos. I don't know how many years ago at this point.
I'm going to say 3, maybe.
3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. So
like
yeah, so we met a little while ago there. And Shaunagh has worked for Channel 4, for Financial Times. You now have your own podcast, right? That you're what's the name of the podcast?
Yes, I have a podcast called Media Tribe. We launched 3 weeks ago. It's essentially a podcast with the world's most respected journalists and Oscar-nominated directors and media executives. And it's all done in a bid to kind of restore our faith in journalism and encourage the next generation, if that's even possible.
Yeah, so it's an upward battle. So
exactly.
But you have worked all over the world, and I thought it would be really interesting for everyone here. Obviously, you've gotten to see a little bit of our discussion before you started. It's a pretty geeky crowd. We get into the nuts and bolts of production, but I think it's always important to look at from the creative perspective, from the host perspective, what it takes to actually put these things together. A lot of us do that as well. So while everyone's listening, make sure to go into the Q&A, if you have any questions for Shaunagh, put those questions in. I have a couple, and then we have some questions here, but definitely put your questions in, and we'll go from there. How did you get started?
Well, in journalism, actually, it's a very zigzagged journey. I started off as an accountant in KPMG in Dublin, was terrible at that, and pivoted quite severely back in 2008 and moved to London to study a master's in journalism. And of course, that was the time, Alex, when the economy was crumbling around us. So it was my parents weren't very happy about the situation at all, and got very lucky.
How long were you an accountant?
I was an accountant for 2 years before that, and it clearly was not the job for me. I was rather disillusioned, I would say, with the corporate world.
Right.
So during my master's, I got accepted into the BBC and an internship, and I guess that's the way a lot of people start. And I became so annoying at the BBC. I used to call them, this was after my internship, kind of cold called them every day or every second day, and begged them for a job until they succumbed under the pressure and eventually gave me work for about 3 weeks. And the rest is history. Ended up making quite hard-hitting documentaries and investigative films for Channel 4 and PBS Frontline, who, of course, you guys will know. My kind of biggest one was about Ebola back in 2014. We were the first filmmakers to go into West Africa and do that. And that film was quite powerful at the time, and it had a lot of impact. It was used by the CDC to help train health workers in West Africa, and off the back of it, we were able to raise a lot of money for Médecins Sans Frontières, which are Doctors Without Borders, of course. And I'm now at the Financial Times in New York, currently in Donegal, post quarantine, trying to get some fresh air.
How did you end up in back in Donegal?
Well, we obviously, New York isn't, it's been a bit tricky in the last few months, of course, like everybody's going through, and we have a 11-month-old baby, and we're both working full-time, lucky to have jobs, myself and my husband. So we kind of thought, we better maybe go home for a bit and try and get a bit of childcare so we can do work and, of course, pursue the podcast, which has been a lot of fun, I must say. If you haven't listened already, definitely take a look. My guest yesterday, I'll just give you an example, as well as kind of the big names in the industry. My guest yesterday is a very well-known photographer. Giles Dooley is his name, and he started off photographing the likes of Oasis and Marilyn Manson. He was the guy who actually photographed Marilyn Manson in the fridge, which is quite an iconic image. And then he went off to photograph the aftermath of conflict, and Giles himself actually stood on a landmine in Afghanistan in 2011 and lost both his legs and an arm, but he continued with his work, and all of his work leads to direct impact. I mean, he's had several Syrian refugees family. He's helped several of them be resettled in Europe. So I definitely would encourage people to go and listen to that episode if you need a bit of inspiration on this Thursday morning.
Well, and to go back to the getting a job at the BBC, how long did it take? How long did you have to badger them to get a job there?
Well, it took probably about 3 months, I'm going to say. And I am very annoying, but in a very polite way. I kind of get my stiletto and wedge it in the door, and I don't let anybody close the door. And eventually they all just, succumb to the pressure. So it took about 3 months. And I really mean that. I was emailing and kind of cold calling there quite frequently. And to this day, the head of world features at BBC is a dear friend, and her husband also, who works at the BBC. I kind of refer to them as my TV parents because they're the ones that gave me a shot. And I kind of had the same experience getting into Channel 4. I'd been doing rolling news for maybe 3 years at the BBC and CNBC, actually. And
when you say rolling news, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, of course. Sorry. It's so, churning out news on the hour, every hour at the desk, kind of putting little packages together, really important news. But I kind of took a step back and thought, actually, the reason I went into journalism was because I wanted to be an investigative journalist, and I really wanted to get into more long form, in-depth stories. So I did that, and took a look around the industry in the UK where I was based, and found a bunch of directors and commissioners who were commissioning, you know, the big films, like the films in Syria and Iraq and Yemen and the likes of Ebola. And I kind of mildly stalked the entire team in Channel 4 and begged them all to come for a coffee. And I would never write in my email, you know, I would never attach my CV, by the way. That's one tip if there are any potential journalists listening in. I would never do that, even though that's clearly what I wanted was a job. But I would just say, you know, any chance you'd come for a quick coffee or a cup of tea, and so I can pick your brain. And eventually got to the main lady at Channel 4, a wonderful woman called Siobhan Sunderton. She happens to be Irish as well. And she gave me the job there and then over the coffee. So that one worked out.
Now, when you were doing the rolling, we're kind of, were you building the whole thing yourself, or what parts of it were you doing? Was someone else shooting with you? How was did you edit it? Or did someone else edit it? How did it get put together there?
Yeah, so actually it's really varied for me. So during my time at the BBC, I was a producer, and then I was also an edit director. So I made I'll give you an example, Alex, a 90-minute documentary that aired on BBC One about David Beckham, the footballer, of course. And I, for example, in that shoot, was not the host, obviously, David Beckham was, and I was the producer. So I went to Djibouti in Eastern Africa, to the Somali border, and with a crew of 30, and managed the entire team and found the story that we wanted to tell and the characters. And then when I got back to the office, I went through all the footage in the edit suite and put that all together as the edit director. So that's quite different than in Channel 4 when I was the correspondent and producer. So you do all the research, the development, you would obviously film, but you'd be in front of camera. So it was a very different experience. But you'd still be in the edit suite, scripting, having a big chunk of a say in how it gets put together. So my role is kind of varied in both places. And now at the FT where I am, it's very different again. I'm an editor there, and I'm kind of exec producing packages as well, that go online at the FT.
Yeah,
and of course with the podcast, it's everything, because it's bootstrapped and there's nobody else to help me. So
now when you travel overseas, is that something that you really wanted to get out of the country, get into the thick of it? Is that really the drive that you had to get out of what you were working on?
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's such a privilege to have had that experience, and and to have been in that position that you have this kind of passport into other people's lives. And I'm actually taking a quote from one of my interviewees. It was a real big interest of mine, and a big interest was to kind of, I guess, tell those unreported stories, kind of not the stories that you see in everyday news, kind of really find those stories that are now not out there in mainstream media, and find the people. And I would always use characters in my films to tell these stories. And, you might take an issue. I'll give you an example, like LGBT rights. I traveled undercover into China a few years ago and tried to expose clinics that were offering electric shock therapy as a cure, or so-called cure, for homosexuality. So that wasn't a story that was in the news at all. But we went and did that, and we got extraordinary footage, secret footage, filmed undercover, and used characters to tell that story. And I think I just have such a drive to be able to do that. And it's a real, I mean, it's amazing if you ever do see your work having a little bit of impact. I obviously mentioned Ebola, but there's been other films. We made a wonderful film in Lebanon, on the Syrian border in the Bekaa Valley, and we filmed with Syrian refugee children who were desperately ill and falling through the cracks. And our investigation exposed the fact that the UNHCR couldn't afford to subsidize these families, and so you'd little kids with cancer and various illnesses who weren't being funded, and we told their story. And then off the back, and some of these kids were dying, so it was very important to tell that story. And then off the back of that film, we were able to help one family who'd lost a son already, and their other little boy had lost an eye in a rocket attack in Syria, and so we were able to help move that family to Sweden. So
when you how do you integrate into the country? So when you go into the country, you're going to do something, let's say in Syria, and I've worked in Iraq. I haven't worked in Syria, but usually a local partner is super important, in that area of understanding. So how do you find that person when you're going into those countries? Is it something that this channel helps you with? Is it something that you have established journalists that you're working with, or how do you find the people that you're going to partner with and trust in that country?
Yeah, I mean, that is such an integral part. Without people on the ground, local journalists and producers, we could not do what we've done. I think that's such a valid point. They do the majority of the work. They do the very hard work. And also it's really important to point out that because it's in their home country, it's way harder for them. They face so many more risks than we would do because we're essentially tourists dipping in and out. So that's actually a massive problem in our industry, and also something we address in the podcast. But we would find local journalists and producers. Sometimes we have a massive contact list. We've operated in a particular country for many years, so we have those contacts. Other times you might put a message out on, there's quite a secret Facebook group where you can put out a message and people say, yeah, I worked with X in the DRC. He's great. He's totally reliable. Give him a shout. And we do that. And you, of course, get references and stuff like that. But generally, we end up working with the most extraordinary journalists on location. And absolutely, to reiterate, we could not do without, you couldn't do it. Foreign correspondents or directors could not do it without those types of people. And those types of people who are taking way more risks than any of us are.
Yeah, and just working with us, puts them at risk. Just being seen. I know that my partner in Iraq, he was that, and you get these stories. He said, well, he used to be SWAT in Baghdad, and he mentioned that at one point he quit SWAT because they blew up his car, and then. And then someone mentioned later that they blew up his car while he was in it. No, he didn't say that. Like, he was like totally, like it was, and he didn't show any, didn't have any signs of that. But it was like, but they're so understated about that, and they don't want to make a big deal about it. But as you know, that's like a risk for everybody at every moment that you're there. And do you feel it? Do you feel the risk when you're there? Or do you feel like you have to? Situational awareness is what we would call it typically. Of just. Do you feel like are there times when you feel like you just have to get back to the hotel or pull back from where you're at? How does that kind of for you, or are you just in the story and not as conscious to it?
Yeah, I've never felt that. And you're just in the story now. I haven't really been in a hostile environment since in the past 18 months because I was obviously pregnant, but I actually was in Honduras in a hostile environment while I was pregnant, not knowing, so that was a bit tricky. But no, I've never had that feeling. I think we do a lot of prep before we go to tricky environments and really have security protocol nailed down. And you'd always have a kind of exit plan if you're dipping into a part of the city like Haiti, for example. We were going into a place called Cité du Soleil, which is notorious in terms of the gangs that are there and the weapons that are abound. And we just had an exit strategy. Our driver we would always have to be able to see our driver on the edge of the slum, and we could get to him. And actually in that shoot, I was producing, so I was we were working with key talent, as they'd call it in the UK. So we actually had a security person with us, of course was not armed because you just don't do that. But we had a very strict idea as to how we would escape a tricky situation. And actually it did become hairy with hindsight. I probably, as I do with most things, just put it to the back of my mind and keep chugging along. But yeah, there was a moment where a gun was slightly revealed and we felt slightly uncomfortable with that situation, and we left, and we're all fine.
Got a couple questions coming in. John Preto said, in my travels, I have found Al Jazeera to be quite objective. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're fantastic. You said objective. I found,
objective.
Yep. I've several friends, a very dear friend who's heading up Al Jazeera Plus in Washington. Yeah, I think there are incredible journalists in there. They get great access. They do great stories. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
Stuart Fairweather asks, he said, since the intro mentioned restoring journalistic integrity, for journalistic ethics, who are your heroes who set a standard to aspire to reach?
That's a great question. Well, I'm actually going to pinpoint a person who is from a particular organization. His name is Malachi Brown. He is the senior producer on the visual investigations team at the New York Times. He's a good friend, and he also appears in the podcast in a few weeks' time. But I would say he is up there with some of the best of them. He recently won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting. And I don't know if you're familiar with what they do, but it's very, very different in terms of the journalism that I've done. It's really forward thinking, and basically they use citizen footage and retrospectively collate a scene. They did the Las Vegas shooting, which was huge. They did a chemical bombing in Douma in Syria, and were able to prove that, yes, it was the regime and Russians who had dropped a chemical bomb. So I would kind of put them up there in terms of the people who I really, really look up to, respect in terms of the journalism that they bring to the table and the ethics that go along with that.
Sky asks, and Sky, you can fill in if there's anything else here, but it said, from fact or perspective, truth or opinion, what's your definition of new in the narrowcast news?
He sent me a message. It's news, yeah.
In the narrowcasting versus broadcasting history. Do you want to kind of elaborate, Sky?
We used to have just 3 channels of information coming at us once a day, and now we're non-stop getting. I'm sorry. What is truth versus fact versus opinion in today's? Everybody's a newscaster because they've got iPhone and YouTube.
I actually think I think I caught some of that. You slightly broke up, but the truth is the truth. It's you know, I've spoken about fake news and misinformation, and it's so easy for us to do our job, because all our job is to tell facts. It is not our job to give our opinion. It is our job to disseminate the noise, cut through the noise, and just tell the facts as they are. I don't know if that answers your questions, because I actually didn't hear.
Well, but here's the harder question.
Propaganda versus information.
But here's the question is that the hard part with the truth, we're telling the truth, but the question you get into is where you go to interview, who you interview, what the height of your camera, like all of those things. It is the facts, but that angle changes the way how it occurs for us, you know, and how do you take that into account while you're, you know, when you're working on a show, because you're trying to tell a story, and how you set it up. I know when I'm trying to tell a story with those types of things, I can decide I want to make the crowd look bigger by making the camera higher, look down on it. You know, I want to do a wider angle. If I want to make it look small, I'm going to use a wide angle lens at head angle and show that there was nobody there. You know, like, and so there's a lot of things. It's not that I'm not telling the truth. It's just, but it may not be the whole story.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying, but I think as journalists, and maybe this is different from you know, filmmaking that's, you know, big documentaries, but actual journalistic documentaries, we should not editorialize. So you shouldn't do that. So I'll give you an example. I made a film about abortion in Ireland like a couple of years ago, right before they repealed the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, and we made a decision not to put in kind of emotional or emotive music in sections where we were telling emotional stories, because that is editorializing, and you should not do that, because we just put the camera there. We let this lady tell her story. There was no music, and the audience were able to, you know, decide for themselves whether they believed her story or how they felt about it. And
I think that the challenge really is that, you know, for me, the break where it ended for me for news, you know, not ended. I'm a news fiend, so I watch a lot of news.
I mean, there's no money in it, right, Alex?
Right. No, but where I suddenly didn't take anything at face value was I was in Zimbabwe during the elections in 2000, and so I was there like during the election for something completely different. I had planned it for months. I had no idea it was happening, and now I'm here teaching students how to shoot video, and there's an election going on, and so I had never been outside the country. So I was 30 years old. I got my passport and all my shots to leave the country to go do this. I get down there and they happen to be in the bar where I was at in Harare. They had a video from CNN International. That crew happened to be right outside the hotel. Right. So I looked outside, and what it looked like on there was a whole bunch of people, you know, cheering. When I looked outside, there was a camera light, and a whole bunch of people had gathered around the camera, you know, and were doing that, you know, but it was completely manufactured, you know, like it was, you know, it was not, because the rest of the streets were just empty because no one knew what was going to happen next, and so it was, people had come up to that. Now the thing is that a couple of days earlier, a larger crowd had built up because there was a car accident, and they were all helping the people out of the car, and then they all started singing. Before you know it, there were 300 people there, and so the thing is that for me, that CNN, it changed the way I looked at CNN forever. Like being there and watching them report on it, because I was like, this is CNN. It wasn't like someone's little thing. And so I think that for me, a lot of times I'm trying to figure out, like, I always want to see the truth from a couple different angles. We do this. I mean, people here have heard me talk about it before, but when we do photogrammetry, when we build 3D models from pictures, you want to see overlapping data from different angles, and then the computer figures out where it is. And I'm always like, wherever it agrees, that's probably the truth, and where they don't agree is probably their opinion. And so when I look at news, I kind of look at that triangulation where I see, Fox and Al Jazeera and all these other ones. What they all agree on is probably closer to the truth, and the other parts are probably more of their opinion. But it's hard to kind of glean that out in what we're doing. Colin, I've been hanging out with you for a little while there. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, you mentioned fake news, and this is one of those things that has been a pet peeve of mine since the term materialized out of thin air. How is it that we suddenly have fake news and no one talks about propaganda? In your mind, is there a difference, and why has fake news been adopted as a phrasing for propaganda these days?
Well, I think it's probably the same thing, propaganda and fake news. And I don't know how political this show gets, but I think it's don't know how much we're allowed to go there, but it's probably the current administration who is
okay. Yeah, well, that was my take on it as well. I just it's one of those things that just it struck me that using the word news in that phrasing somehow legitimizes or makes less threatening the experience of agenda driven content, which,
well, I'm sure it was deliberately used. I would say
I'm sure,
of course. And it's
just that you mentioned it. I'm like, wait a minute. Serious newscasters use the word fake news.
But I was actually going to say a naughty word, but I don't know if we're allowed to say it begins with a B and an S. Which another one of my guests, Evan Davis from the BBC, who you'll probably know, he's an amazing broadcaster. He wrote a book about this, and he called it the BS word. So I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say that.
Yeah. Alex will throw a fit. No one else will.
I think one of the challenges for you is cutting through a lot of that, because everybody has an agenda. Everybody talking to you has an agenda. I think that's the hard part, is that as you have to kind of figure out where people's filters are, because I know I've, reported, been in the news, but also on the other side working for organizations, and my job is to get a certain story out, and the journalists we talk to are people that we think are going to say the things we want to. It's not that we're not telling them what to say. We just know what they're likely to say. And so we're more likely to give them the inside scoop, because it's most likely going to be a positive thing. We're going to give them better footage. We're going to give them better access. We're going to give them, and then we take people who are going to be more problematic and we cut them off. And so, but those are things that are challenging, because those are much more subtle than whether someone's telling the truth or not. It's just that, there's an environment where you're, and I've, again, on a daily basis, I'm working on both sides of the puzzle. And so for me, I kind of see through a lot of those things just because I know what the filter is. But I think for you, that must be almost on a day-to-day basis, trying to figure out what the agenda is of every person talking to you.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Maybe I've taken it for granted. I just don't find it's a problem, because maybe I'm a very ethical person. In fact, I know I am, but it's just our job as journalists to corroborate, to double source, to make sure people aren't. I actually go into most interviews or scenes and assume people are lying to me. That's how cynical I've kind of become. And then I disprove myself. And that's my job as a journalist, to do that. And yeah, I think, and you'll see a lot of the great organizations, and PBS Frontline, who I've just worked with on an opioid film with Financial Times, which I brought to the paper. And, PBS will I think they actually provide the transcriptions of all of the interviews, so you can see exactly what didn't make the cut and what did make the cut. And it's our job also, to be transparent about that, right. Exactly that. So yeah, it's a really, really good point. I just haven't had that problem myself. I'm glad to say.
Chris. Chris, Fenwick, and then Fritchie. We got a lot of Chris.
I was wondering, and this might be more U.S. centric, but do you have an opinion on the or any thoughts on the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 in the U.S. and then the subsequent modernization of it in 2012 under Obama?
Oh, that's way too
In
clever
regards
for me.
to
You're
the
gonna
whole
have to ask
fake
that
news
to somebody
thing.
else.
Okay, all right, sorry. I just wondered how prevalent it was among news agencies worldwide.
I'm not
don't even know.
familiar.
It was the Smith-Mundt Act was enacted in 1948 when the Voice of America was the U.S. government determined that the propaganda that the VOA was producing was not appropriate for the U.S. audience, and they basically made it illegal to broadcast VOA or share VOA to the U.S. audience. In 2012, Obama obliterated that and said, no, it's okay. We can pass propaganda on to the US audience again.
That's
Which
interesting.
was
I didn't know
really
that.
weird, but I mean, it's worth looking into. The Smith-Mundt Act. It's on the internet.
It
Must
sounds
be
like
true.
a story there. Yeah, it's on the internet. Must be, yeah, exactly. Chris, Fritchie.
Sorry, I had to step out, so I don't know if this question was asked, but are you free to report on whatever you want, even if it's a story that goes against a sponsor of your station?
So my job at the moment is slightly different in the sense I was reporting at Channel 4, so maybe I'll answer it from a Channel 4 perspective. Yes, I'm free. I'm free to report on anything I wanted at Channel 4. It's like they just wouldn't care about something like that. It's independent journalism. You can't just obviously walk into your commissioner's office and say, hey, I'm heading out to do this. You would have to pitch it in a way to convince them that it's firstly accurate, newsworthy, there's something unfolding happening, and you've all the tools to be able to tell that story. But yeah, advertisers or something like that would not get in the way. My role at the Financial Times is there are other people going out to report stories, and then I'm in the background editing.
Stephen Kimbrough asks, how was your FT article on opioid epidemic received? Mainly, there is more in the news epidemic going on now.
Yeah, well, it was received very well. It was kind of it was a case about a company called Insys Therapeutics, which was kind of a long-standing case that had been reported by Roddy Boyd years before, who's an amazing journalist, but it was received very well. I think it actually made me think that people really still care about the opioid crisis and epidemic, and maybe even more now that we're in this current pandemic, which was really interesting to us because obviously we were slightly concerned about releasing it when we did because it was June and the world's attention was elsewhere, but actually it really seemed to have landed and people really cared. And they're predicting that the opioid crisis will potentially get worse during this current pandemic.
Tom Wineland asks, he said, I would really like to see the doc on LGBTQ rights in China and other shows you've done. Are all these on your website?
Yes, they are. I think it's shaunagh.com at the moment. But yeah, I'm at Shaunagh on Twitter. That's SHAUNAGH. Bloody Irish spelling makes no sense whatsoever. But reach out to me there, and I can send you that link. And I've also made another film about LGBT refugees escaping Iraq and Syria as well, if that's a subject that you're interested in. But yeah, it's on YouTube and it's called China's Gay Shock Therapy. It was a Channel 4 production.
Kyle Nesta asks, how do you balance objectively uncovering a story with our instinct to editorialize and inject personal feelings into the narrative? So you talked about it a little bit, but how do you keep separating that process out for yourself?
Yeah, it is actually, I mean, it can be hard, especially when you're in a situation where something feels so wrong. It's hard to be objective when, you see kids dying, really bluntly. Again, this is something I discuss with Jon Snow from Channel 4, objectivity, but there's kind of right and there's wrong, and it's okay to point out wrong, and that's you can still be objective in that manner. I think what you're kind of slightly asking as well is it's the emotional side of that. Like, being very honest, I sometimes found that part hard, was to contain emotions when you're witnessing deeply upsetting scenes. But I think your job as a journalist is to be the observer and to try and contain your emotions, which is different to empathy. I would say I do use empathy as a tool in my journalism, because I think it's something that, you know, really helps get the audience engaged. And if you can convince them to care about a person instead of an issue, which is often sometimes easier, yeah, I think that's okay to do.
Kyle Hammond asks, what are your thoughts about journalism versus capitalism, with the news orgs laying off journalists right now, left and right? What does the future of journalism look like for you?
That's a great question. I'm a little bit scared about the future of journalism, if I'm really honest. You know, journalists need to eat. We need to be paid. There's no money in investigative journalism. It's really hard to get investigative journalism funded right now. You'll of course seen all the layoffs in places like BuzzFeed, and also The Guardian last week. Like, that's a real problem when that's happening. And it's because, of course, the big tech companies have made that very troubling and problematic for organizations to be able to make money. So I would say I am fearful for the future of journalism. I think a lot of people are. It's a very tough world to break into, and it's an expensive career to chase at the beginning, because a lot of the internships are for free. I certainly interned for free and had another job on the side, and that was hard. And you know, I'm not from. I said this on Irish radio there last week. I think you know, I shocked the reporter, but I'm not posh, and I'm not, you know, I'm not privately educated or anything like that. And our industry actually needs more diversity in that sense, that we're hearing from different perspectives. And when it's so expensive to actually enter the industry, that's a real problem. So I'm fearful for the future, but I think there are amazing journalists out there, and there are amazing bosses out there who are doing great stuff. And I just think, yeah, we kind of need to find a model that works in our capitalist world.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Tom asks, is the Beckham documentary available online?
It is. Yeah, that's probably one of my more glamorous ones, Alex, actually, and Tom. It is. It's called For the Love of the Game, and Beckham travels to every single continent in 10 days and plays a soccer game with people he meets. So he starts off in Papua New Guinea, then goes to Nepal, then comes to me in Djibouti, and then goes to Argentina, I think, ends up in Miami, and then the Antarctic. Sorry, I forgot that one. That was heartache. And then back to Old Trafford in England, where he plays a football match with his old teammates. And it really is a lovely documentary in so many ways. Obviously, it was completely bonkers to make. You know, I obviously can't be telling any of those stories.
Now,
but,
did you work on certain stories, a certain city, only one segment, or did you work on the whole piece?
I worked on the whole piece to begin with, so I helped kind of set up the Antarctic segment. I helped set up the Nepal segment, and then Djibouti was kind of, I guess, my baby. I went over there, let's say, 4 days in advance of David, and I actually found the most lovely story. And I remember being so excited and ringing my editor, and I'd be like, you'll never guess, I found the David Beckham and Sir Alex Ferguson of Somalia. And basically in this refugee camp, Ali Ade it was called, I'd found two, I think Isa was his name. It was basically a coach in this refugee camp, and he was wearing a Liverpool jersey, and he used to coach young refugee children how to play soccer every day. And he actually used to play for the national Somalian team. And then and then we found a mini David Beckham who was a really skilled player. And David, after that game, was like, these guys are really good. And there was such a profound moment after we filmed that, where he says, you know, he's just taken it for granted that he can wear his country's shirt and represent his country. These guys have just been, you know, they've had to evacuate their country. They'll never have that chance. And, you know, none of them, of course, would have passports or anything like that to ever even leave. So yeah, that was, I hope you enjoyed that. Actually, it was a lovely one to make.
That's great. Jesse asks, are there certain news agencies that you have worked for that focus on highlighting stories, issues that, when broadcast, could make a positive humanitarian, environmental, or social impact? Certain organizations that more so than others, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Channel 4, Unreported World was the program that I worked for 6 years, and that's categorically what we do. We find those stories and try to have impact. I think Channel 4, if you're not familiar with who they are, they're basically the alternative to the BBC in the UK. They're not publicly funded, they have advertising, but the bosses within Channel 4, like, they just want to do those hardcore stories and go, you know, where nobody else goes. And they really do that, and they do that so well.
That's great. And just as a note, with people, there were a couple political questions in here, and we're going to stay away from those. so overtly political, we'll steer clear of those. Dirk asks, if you must travel light, what would your kit be like? Camera, mic, editing equipment, what would you be taking?
That's a really good question as well. Well, I mean, sometimes we don't take any kit and we would hire it on the ground. China, great example. We were obviously entering the country undercover. So I was going in as a tourist from Hong Kong. My director was going in from, I think, via Dubai. So we bought all of our kit in the ground. So we traveled very lightly for that one. And we even, you know, bought our secret filming gear there. But yeah, generally we would, you'd take a Canon C300 was generally what we filmed with. We would take 2 of them just in case one broke, because you could be, you know, in a really remote region. Maybe a couple of, maybe 4 radio mics, a tripod, but a kind of a light tripod, because you're most likely just a team of 3, and that's including your local producer. Yeah, I should say, you know, for Channel 4 and Reporter World, it was just a team of 3, whereas, you know, at the BBC and the Beckham documentary, there was, you know, a lot of people. It was a team of 30, so it can be very different. But yeah, so generally just a C300 or an FF7, something like that.
That's great.
What audio would you be using?
God, I actually can't answer that. I don't remember.
iPhone?
Sorry.
iPhone?
No, I mean, you could actually, we have, I would bring my Zoom recorder. I've done that. And then just a couple of radio mics, probably some type of boom, like a gun mic for the top of the camera. That's about it. Oh no, we generally didn't used to use iPhones. I can't actually remember. It's been a while.
Sky also said, starting your own podcast is becoming your own business rather than working for someone else as a freelancer. What are your passion points? What parts of the world are you trying to save or impact?
And by the way, I was also at City Soleil 10 years ago. So I know that.
Tricky one.
Yeah, well, the Big Red One was and they had big machine guns. So we were working with the WHO. So yeah.
Oh, very good. Oh, lovely to know. I actually loved Haiti, mind you. But just to answer that question, podcast I started while on maternity leave, and it's something I'm really passionate about, I would say. I kind of have 3 goals. It's, as I said, to restore the audience's faith in journalism, and the way in which I think they will do that is listening to these people to understand why they do what they do and the integrity they have. And I just ask 3 very basic questions: your journey into journalism, you know, a moment you can pinpoint where you had impact, and then a crazy story that never made it to air. So people, so some bonkers stories. I'll give you an example. Jon Snow, the main broadcaster in Channel 4, he's really quite famous in the UK. He was on a small aircraft with the Ugandan dictator Idi Amin, and he saw his gun was kind of protruding as Idi Amin fell asleep, and John was like, "Should I kill him?" And he tells me this in the podcast, and it's just hilarious. So that's one aim: restore our faith in journalism. Genuinely to inspire the next generation of journalists. I think when young journalists hear about, you know, all the kind of zigzagged patterns into this industry, they might be inspired and think, oh, that's grand. I don't have to be educated in Cambridge or Oxford or wherever. You know, I can get in here. Yeah, and also to amplify voices that we don't often hear from. So it's not just the people in front of the camera, and, you know, no offense to white men, but it's not just white men we hear from. You know, my very first 3 episodes I launched with was Jon Snow, who is of course a man, and Rana Ayub from the Washington Post, who is a Muslim lady living in India, reporting on extrajudicial killings over there and living on the fringes. And then the other reporter is Ariel Duhem-Smith, who is a woman of color and identifies as queer, and she's a wonderful host from Reset on Vox Media. So they're my aims.
What's your crazy story? What's yours?
Mine? Oh yeah, this is quite.
Yes,
I don't know if it's it's a funny one. So I was in Iran, and reporting over there, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but there's a street called Bobby Sands, the Bobby Sands Street. And I don't know if anyone knows who Bobby Sands is, but he's an IRA hunger striker. And of course, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, who are, you know, tricky people, to say the least, in Ireland, and were a big integral part of the Troubles in Northern Ireland for years. So the Iranians decided to call a street after Bobby Sands, and the street is right beside the British embassy. So essentially, you know, they were more or less given the middle finger to the Brits. So I took a photo of myself and my director on that street, you know, with the headscarf and all the rest of it. And I sent it to my husband. And as I said, we're up in Donegal, where he's from. And it's in the northern part of Ireland. It's not part of Northern Ireland. It's in Ulster, but it's right beside the border. And I sent it to him. And a week later, he was in a pub in Donegal. And who did he meet? Bobby Sands' brother, Sean Sands, and he showed him the photo, and they both lost it. Like, they lost it. Bobby Sands is a very popular man in Iran, and actually, I think when people heard I was Irish, we got a lot more access than the normal journalist would have because of that.
It is funny how a lot of those seemingly insignificant things, when you connect with people, I always, when I'm working overseas, a lot of times I always explain to people that so many of the rules are subjective, and so many things and how you interact with folks and funny things, you know, connecting with people that, you know, you suddenly get more access and a lot of other things because they thought that something was funny or they're connected to it. And, you know, I think I learned that more in Rome than anywhere else. My fixer in Rome, if you ever need a fixer in Rome, I got a guy for you.
You never know.
He gets me, like, we would get into the Vatican without going through anything. Like, it would, and I was like, how did you do that? He's like, oh, just there's some conversation. You know, he knows everybody. So anyway, have you ever had any bad issues? Stephen Kimbrough asks, any quote unquote bad issues at the border? Have you ever had any border issues?
In Ireland or elsewhere?
All over, going in and out. I think almost all of us have had some stressful moment getting in and out.
Getting in and out. God, I actually love going through a border checkpoint. That's so weird. And it's probably
There's one of you. There's one of you.
There's one of me. And it's probably because I grew up just below the border in Northern Ireland. And yeah, I haven't, if I'm honest, I haven't. I'm trying to think the last kind of tricky, you know, there's checkpoints all over Lebanon, I remember, but it was always fine. Yeah. There's some places you operate in that you just feel fine. And I think, you know, I think the Irish passport is definitely, you know, a handier passport to have. I remember when I was doing my hostile environment training, there was a bunch of us from Channel 4, and of course a lot of my colleagues were English, and one of the pieces of advice we got from our instructor, who'd served in Northern Ireland with the SAS, he operated in Libya quite a lot, and his big tip was, he had a British passport, but he had an Irish cover for the British passport, and he would take that to Libya. And of course, this is during Gaddafi's time, so you know, all the connections with Libya and Ireland. So so when we were doing a stunt in our hostile environment training, you know, we were driving along, and all of a sudden, all of these guys jumped out from the bush with balaclavas on and AK-47s, and they had them to our head. And, you know, the entire team were like, we're Irish, we're Irish, we're Irish. And I was like, they're not Irish. I'm the only one that's Irish. And the rest of them were kidnapped. So it was grand.
No, what's that? How much training did you get when in the hostile environment training? What did it entail?
Yeah, it was a week-long training. And I mean, you know, that part I was kind of like, whatever. But the really good part of that is actually the medical training, which is imperative. You know, I haven't lost any colleagues who've operated in conflict zones, but I certainly have friends of friends who have, and for that reason, people who could have survived, but their colleagues didn't know how to, you know, put on a tourniquet, or they just didn't know what to do. So that, you know, that training is actually really valid, and anybody who goes into a tricky or complex environment has to do that training, which is really important.
No, absolutely. Next question from Chris Fritchie. He said, when deciding a story or reporting on a story, how fine is the line between reporting in such a way to determine a viewpoint and simply reporting the facts and letting the viewers determine their own viewpoint?
I again, just report the facts. You know, it's really interesting that this seems to be a strong theme. And I do wonder if it's because I do think journalism in the UK, it's pretty black and white. You just wouldn't get away with not telling the facts or imposing your opinion. The places I've worked, BBC, Channel 4, and of course now the Financial Times, you just have to report the facts. It's kind of here nor there, and there's such a rigorous process to make sure that that's what you have done. There really is, and rightly so.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard. We're American, you know, like we're like, or a lot of people asking that question are like, really, you know, like you know, there's definitely, you know, I think that's the hard part now is that everyone's kind of looking. All of us look through that filter now. Phil,
yeah, what a shame.
then,
what a shame.
Phil,
yeah.
This is why you have to have this podcast. Is that we're all looking at it like, yeah. So yeah, Phil and then Sky.
So to that point that you talk about, you know, just reporting the facts, is that idea diametrically opposed to drama, which is what I think we as Americans look for in our television news entertainment? You know, I say that sarcastically, of course, but I'm wondering if just reporting the facts is by nature removing all the drama.
I guess it is. I think if you switch on the news in the UK, you will notice that it's quite significantly different in the morning, let's say. And there, you know, the dramatics and kind of the camaraderie and all the banter, let's say, is there in American TV, which I wouldn't be used to at all. And maybe it is a bit dull that you're just reporting the facts, but that's just what you have to do. Actually, I haven't released this episode yet. As I mentioned, Evan Davis, this is what we talk about in the episode. And Evan, of course, has written his book about this. And he's one of the big broadcasters in the UK and the BBC. You know, I would say, you know, in documentary making, in filmmaking, of course, we do look for characters, let's say, who have jeopardy or whose, you know, unfolding narrative does have, you know, a moment of jeopardy. But that's still reporting the facts. And a moment of jeopardy could be everything from sitting an exam to, you know, a bomb going off in Baghdad. And if that's happened, that's a fact. So we would, as documentarians, report the before, the jeopardy point, and the after, and just tell it as it is. And so I guess you have drama in that sense, but you're still reporting the facts. You know, you're not doing anything but that, and everything has to be fact checked, like quite thoroughly.
Well,
before
and again, I think that I think we have so much news, you know, like here, that I think it's less of are you saying the facts and which facts are you saying, you know, so that we're just reporting the facts, but the main thing is that, you know, from any point of view, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to tell you, well, I think this is important, this is important, this is important, and I'm going to pick those facts out. Now, if I fact check it, all of that stuff is accurate. You know, I think that the challenge that we see in the US, at least, is that all the information that is, not all the information, obviously, but a vast majority of the information is accurate, but the collection of it, of all of those accurate points and how they're tied together, may not give you the whole picture, you know, of what's of what that's looking at. And the way I look at it, and again, I can be a little incredulous. Again, as I grew up, you know, I've grown up and I work. I'll give you an example. There was a big drama in 2016 about there was a debate between Romney and Obama. I don't think I've ever said this in public, so I'll probably get myself in trouble.
This is a safe space, Alex. It's all good.
During that debate, there was a loud thump, a big bang, you know, and it was on Fox News. It was on everything. Everyone talked about that big bang. And that it was there to distract Obama or to give Romney an advantage or to give Obama an advantage. There was all these different things. It was a distraction. They both looked over where the bang came from. You know, it was a pretty loud noise. And so there was all this news about what it was and everything else. And there was it was all over the internet and everything else. Well, I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that the loud bang that was heard at that moment was a Pelican 1650 going over a metal yellow jacket. So there's all the cables go through these yellow jackets, and this one happened to be metal. It was like a really loud one, and someone might have been trying to get out after they'd finished all their work and didn't care about the debate and went over it and hit it, and it made a really loud noise, and it happened to be right next to a door that was opened that goes, I mean, literally from that door is right into the stage, right? And then you look at Secret Service goes, no, it's nothing. And then you leave. But
that's brilliant.
And so the point is that there was all this decision process. For me, I found it entertaining to watch the next week of swirling, because there's all these decisions about what that meant and who was doing it and the conspiracy theory and all this stuff. And I was like, it was just a Pelican case.
What was in your case, Alex?
What?
What was in your case, Alex?
What was in my? I didn't say it was my case.
I know you didn't say it was.
I'm gonna jump back to motivation.
Alex, are you cherry picking facts in favor of?
Yeah. See. Yeah. No. See, I gave you a bunch of facts, and I didn't admit that it was mine. It was a whole bunch of stuff for doing Hangouts. We were doing a bunch of Hangouts with candidates, and so anyway, the point is that you look at that, and people will look at those, and then where they travel from those opinions that are related to those, and a lot of times when I'm looking at the news, you look at when they talk, especially when reporters talk about technology, as someone who is in the middle of it, you're like, that person has no idea what they're talking about, like they what they're picking and what they're talking about, and so that's the hard part to glean out. It's not so much that it's not true or the facts aren't true, it's just that what people are paying attention to is the wrong thing from someone who really and I think all of us have had that happen. Something gets reported around something that we actually know something about, and then we're like, that's crazy, but then we think that everything else must be true, and we're kind of like, well, and so it's not so much that things are fake or not fake. It's just that the collection of true things may not give you a full picture of what's there. I think that as Americans, because we get so much news and because it's coming from so many different directions, I think that we've kind of started to build up this filter that goes, well, we have to hear from a couple different people before we're going to take it at face value, which makes it harder as a journalist, because we have to hear it from a couple different journalists before we'll let it totally sink in.
Can I jump in?
Yep, go ahead, Sky.
Because I started in media, in news, in Los Angeles. If it bleeds, it leads is an old journalistic phrase, but also where, follow the money. If we are corporately sponsored and that's what's keeping the news on the air, then you're going to be a little biased, unfortunately, and you're going to try to find your audience and preach to that audience. So I think working for the BBC as a state-run organization, you've got a different funding source, and so you have a different freedom, just like HBO has a different freedom as a subscription versus a paid because of a commercial that you have to sit through. So I know 4, however, is a commercial based. So do you have the same freedom in the BBC as you would in Channel 4?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Well, that's a British
100%. Not even an issue. Not even an issue.
Would you work for Sky TV?
No comment, because who knows what's around the corner, but no comment.
Bill Davis, and then Chris Ritchie.
So what challenges me, though, is that I'm seeing a different level of, I guess I'd call it dishonesty, which is somebody saying this is the biggest crowd that's ever attended this particular football stadium. And you were at the game and you have season tickets and you've seen it full, and you've seen the fact that at that particular game, there were empty seats at the top. And so that is a direct contradiction to actual fact. And I think we're seeing a good amount of that injected into all these streams on all these circumstances. And that's what really bothers me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris Ritchie?
Yeah, so Shaunagh, the reason I asked that question is because of what Bill is talking about there and what Sky just mentioned. And sorry, I'm probably coming in too hot. And my problem is when I watch the news, I just by default assume I'm hearing somebody's opinion. And I'm free to develop my own opinions based on that. But because it's an opinion, am I hearing all of it or am I hearing less of it? So I'm not going to say I've resorted to, but now I listen to a podcast that's called No Agenda, and it's a media deconstruction podcast. And what they do is they listen to all the news networks. They filter out all the stories, and then they tell you what the differences were between the stories between the networks. And it's a very good way to hear the news. And I've literally just stopped watching the news.
The hard part is that those guys have their own agenda.
Well,
I know them.
There's
so
no,
I'm just telling you.
You can say they have an agenda, but their agenda is to tell you what all of them said and point out the differences.
It's hard. It's hard. What would you, Kyle, Kyle asks, what advice would you have for a student interested in journalism today?
My advice would be, don't take no for an answer, back yourself and go for it. And sorry, go on, Alex.
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's pretty much it.
I mean,
Yeah.
the reason I wanted you to talk more about how you got into the BBC is that I think that people need to always hear about a lot of us who have gone somewhere have just banged on that door over and over and over again until we got in. And I think people think that somehow they're going to get some break, or it's all going to turn out, or they're just going to go to school and they're going to come out and get a job. And a lot of people who have gotten the job that they wanted or have moved forward, it came from a lot of hard-headedness,
It's so true. It's so true. I think one great thing to have in this industry is ideas, story ideas. And I used to use that as my currency as well. During my fake coffee meetings where I was obviously looking for a job, but didn't say that outwardly. I would always come with a great idea and say, oh my God, I think this would be a fantastic story to pursue. And I have this lead and I have this access. And so I think that is really helpful if you are that way inclined as well. But the thing is, like, in this industry, people will say no, and they'll always say no, and they don't want to kind of, a lot of people don't want to go out of their way, but then there's a lot of people who are willing to use their capital and find those people. I mean, if there is anybody listening to this who happens to want to go into journalism, do reach out to me. I have young journalists reach out all the time. And again, as I said, big part of the reason I started the podcast, and maybe in the future I'll do some type of sessions where I can help people get their foot in the door. Maybe that's down the line. But I think you just have to keep trying. It certainly didn't land in my lap. Absolutely not. I knew nobody at the BBC. I had no contacts actually in England when I moved over whatsoever. And I just was that annoying that they just had to give me a job. And it's not because I'm better than anybody else. I'm, the exact same. But yeah, you just don't take no for an answer.
May I buy you a cup of tea?
Yes.
I would like to. How can we connect with you?
Oh, okay. Well, as I said, on social media, I'm Shaunagh, Shaunagh on Twitter. And then on Instagram, I'm Shaunagh Connaire. Surname is spelled Connaire. And Media Tribe is thismediatribe.com if you want to, or it's on all the usual podcast apps. But yeah, I'm really willing to chat to people and make time to do that. It's people put their neck in the line for me. I know I mentioned Evan Davis, who wrote that book. He is my mentor and pal, and he was instrumental in my career. He just believed in me, and that wonderful Belfast woman who the commissioner at Channel 4, when I had a coffee with her many moons ago and pitched her a story, and where she gave me the job in that moment, she has been instrumental in my career as well. And you just need to get some people and some allies in your court and get them to help you along. But it's not that hard. If I could do it, certainly anyone can do it.
I love some PG tips.
Awesome.
Rachel Ann Clifton asked the same thing. So, and you think this podcast, it's in this break right now, but you think you're now that you got it off the ground, you'll be able to keep it going?
No, it's not in a break at all. It's
you're in the middle of everything else. No, I'm saying you started it during this COVID slowdown.
Yeah.
But you think you'll be able to keep it going?
100%. I started it during maternity leave. The idea came about when I was on maternity leave, and I really wanted to do something creative and put something quite positive out there. So I have now 5 episodes released, and I'm going to release one every single Wednesday, and just keep going, because people have asked, is it a series? I'm like, God, no. I've so many interviewed already, and there's some great people in there that have wild stories to tell. So I think, yeah, it's been a really, really fun thing, and a learning curve, because I'd never done audio before. But there you go. It's good, I hope and think.
Last question from Michael J. What person or company throws the best party at Davos?
Oh, well, I'm not important enough to actually get invited to any of those, but I would say, do you know what, Alex? I'm so glad whoever the person is that asked that question, because I'm not really into Davos. I'm not into the World Economic Forum. It's not a fit for me at all. And the best nights I had in Davos were actually in the local bar, drinking pints of beer with normal people. And I would say that's where the best parties are, in the kind of Swiss bars where you meet the locals. And yeah, they're the best nights I had.
Yeah, I the best part of setting up for Davos was being able to experience it before everybody showed up. So I don't, so because we'd be there for a week before to do the setup, and we didn't see anything. I mean, all I saw was the studio that we worked in, where I met you.
Yeah,
that was it. I mean, that was all I saw that. And then we would get on the train and go to clusters or somewhere else in Davos, and it was always some nasty walk and in the really cold air, but fondue in Davos, there's a couple good fondue places that amazing. Anyway, Shaunagh, thank you so much for coming and spending an hour with us. It was such a pleasure to have
lovely
you.
to meet you all, and thanks for the amazing questions. As I said, get in touch. Do have a little listen to Media Tribe, and it was lovely to meet you all on the panel as well.
Awesome.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thank
Bye bye. See you later.
Story is people, not issues. Lovely. Thank you.
And now we're shifting gears yet again. It's 9 o'clock and time to move over to Mimo Live with Oliver. Hey, Oliver.
Hey, how are you?
I'm
Can
doing
you hear
well.
me? Yes.
We can hear
Okay.
you just fine. And I'm, as always,
okay.
You're coming in just fine. And I'm going to bow out. I have to go back to work. My
Could
work
you
day is
make me
beginning.
co-host? Chris is leaving too.
Okay, great. Stand by. I can't do it, but Mickey can get you set up. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Mickey,
All right. See you later.
Please.
All right. And also you need to make me co-host or something so I can share the screen, right?
You are, Oliver. You got it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Thanks for having me again. Looking forward to this hour with you guys. And I've got a couple of things I'd like to discuss after a number of announcements. We're gonna cover the layer sets, which we've just briefly touched last time, and I think much too fast. So we're gonna revisit that and look at this in a little bit more detail. And also I'm gonna go into a couple of secret Mimo Live features that are not really secret, but most people using Mimo Live discover them fairly late in the learning curve, and I'd like to give you an overview of those. For example, we're gonna touch the multi-view capabilities of Mimo Live. There is a cool layer called the follow layer, which I'm gonna show you, and we're gonna go and look at projection mapping with Mimo Live. And then we'll see what other things we also have if we have more time. And I think we have a new chat system that I haven't used before. So Mike, are you gonna monitoring the questions there? Is there any? Are there?
Yeah, I'll read the questions for you if we have any.
So yeah, and let me know if there are any questions. So a couple of announcements what is that? Housekeeping. Let me see.
All right, first, Oliver, what is that thing on top of the stack behind you with the Ethernet port on it?
It's an Ethernet port. Yes, it's the power over Ethernet adapter for the Mevo Start. So
okay,
it's this thing here, which gives me power and Ethernet for the Mevo camera, and I hope I didn't break anything, so I can later show you the camera. So the big advantage of that is that I'm never going to run out of power on this thing, and also I don't have to use the Wi-Fi network, which makes it a little more stable in conditions where there's a lot of noise, signal noise in the Wi-Fi spectrum. All right, good. So the announcements. you keep throwing me off track here. So first of all, if you are interested in Mimo Live and like your questions answered in between those things here, go to we will welcome you to our forum. I'm going to post the URL in the chat here, The engineering team and I hang out and try to answer all the questions that are going on that you post there. Also, we're gonna do a live stream the week after next, I think, with MimoLive 5.8 being released hopefully next week. And there's lots and lots and lots of stuff new in there. A couple of weeks ago, I showed you the beta 1 and some of the features there, and we will certainly touch those in the live stream. And if you want to get notified if we do a new live stream, please sign up to get the Alex Lindsay special license. Even if you already have if you already have signed up, then you don't need to sign up again. But if you didn't sign up yet, sign up there if you want to be notified of new live streams from Boinks. And I'm gonna post also that.
Doesn't that license end like Saturday now?
That is the next thing I'm gonna touch on.
Oh boy!
Oh yeah, you're way ahead of me here. All right, so sign up even if you don't want the license, if you just want to be notified for the updates. The license. So we were offering all the attendees of the Alex Lindsay office hours a 3-month license ending on July 31st. So these licenses are going to run out. If you like to continue using MimoLive, then I would be very happy to learn that you actually buy a license. You can still follow these tutorials and use the expired license, which the only thing that's going to happen is that you will have a watermark in the program out that you can't remove, but the application stays fully functional otherwise. If you have not yet requested one of those licenses, everybody who is requesting the license from now on is going to get a 30-day free license, but of course you should not have requested one before. So go to this survey and fill it out if you want to play along and try MimoLive in earnest. So that's the announcements. If there are any questions, Mike, if you now is the time to ask the questions that regarding the licenses and stuff, because I just answered them.
Yeah, well, I know I'm one that I'll be buying.
Okay, cool.
I just made very useful use of it to record stuff on my screen. I can't think of anything else I could record, a screen scrape so easily. So.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff you can do with MimoLive, so I hope you get your money's worth, of course. All right, so do we have any questions that we can answer right away? So
yeah, Michael J says, "What's the cost?" You might want to go over that again.
Yeah, I can quickly share my screen. And desktop 2, that's the one I want to share. And now I just have to find a web browser and take you to the website. And there's just MimoLive buy. Do that. All right, so the plans and the prices, as you can see, there's 3 tiers here. The non-profit is for educational and private use. The studio is for commercial use, and the broadcast is for the big broadcast customers. And the difference is mainly how you use it. Technically, there's only right now only one difference between the nonprofit and the studio, and that's the support for SDI key and fill playout. So if you need to use MimoLive with a big switcher and want to use it only for graphics playout, then you need to have the studio version. And the other difference is, of course, the level of support. The non-profit version we support basically over email and our forum, and the studio license and the broadcast license give you access to more senior support personnel faster. I have of course, I'm showing the euro prices because I am in Europe, and so the website assumes the euro prices. And let me see if I can switch to the US prices. Not quickly.
Yeah, I think it amounts to $20 a month for the private version in US.
What did I do here? Okay. So $20 a month, $70 a month for the studio license, and the broadcast license is $200 a month. And if you go and purchase 12 months or 36 months at the time, you get a huge discount. The 36 months, this is almost 50% off. So that is a really good value for the money. And if you go to the website and you're from the United States or from South Africa or from Asia, you'll get the prices in your local currency. So check out the website for the pricing. All right, so we've answered that one. Any other?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry for, okay, let me see. Gabriel Ung has two questions. I noticed that when you screen share, you're hitting your GPU pretty hard. Is that a concern when you're using MimoLive? And what is the recommended video codec for media playback? I'm trying to reduce my GPU usage. You're not going to reduce it with MimoLive if you're lucky.
The GPU usage is pretty high right now. I don't really know exactly why. Of course, screen sharing with Zoom adds to that, and I'm not, recommending to do screen sharing with, Zoom or other apps in a production environment, because that's certainly going to impact performance. What's the recommended video codec for media playback? This is a tricky question. There's a couple of things you should take into concern if you playback a video. So we support H.264, but if you use an H.264 file, it's gonna take up a hardware decoder in your computer, or use software decoding. ProRes is usually a little less on the CPU, but more on the hard disk or storage media. If you, the biggest load on the system is if you have to convert anything. So if you go, if you play out MimoLive with 30 frames per second and you play a 2497 video or 2797 video, then there's going to be a conversion going on, which takes CPU time. Also, if you play out full HD and the video has 4K or 6K, then there's a lot of scaling that has to go on. So if you want to, which should usually not be a problem, but if you run into issues, it's always helpful to convert the video first to the proper frame rate and screen dimensions before you play it, because that's gonna at least save you a little bit of performance. GPU, right now I'm only hitting the storage on the GPU, and that's probably because I have a lot of stuff going on. And this is just a small little AMD 570 or something external GPU attached to my Mac Mini, so I'm not running a very big graphics card. All right, so I think we answered all the open questions for now.
Question for you, Oliver. Does that, I mean, I'm noticing with my external GPU, does it use the external GPU for the monitors that are attached to it and not system wide, right? I mean, if I'm using a monitor attached to the Mac, that one is, anything I put on there is still going through the Intel GPU, right? Is that how that works?
It's yes. So you have to take a little check mark in the Finder for MemoLive. If you go and let me show you that. The applications, MemoLive. Where's MemoLive? Down here somewhere. There's a checkbox here that says prefer external GPU. So
no, I did not know that. Beautiful.
if you want to use MemoLive on any screen and you still wanted to use the GPU, you have to tick this checkbox. But other than that, as soon as you put the MemoLive onto the screen that's attached to your eGPU, it's automatically using the eGPU. So no worries there. Generally, I would recommend, if you have an eGPU, to attach the monitor to the eGPU, because if you don't, then putting things on the screen needs to copy the video data from the eGPU to the internal GPU, and that's not very efficient. So if you have an eGPU, attach a monitor to the eGPU and use MemoLive on that monitor.
That's very helpful information that I did not know. Thank you.
All right, good. So let's get started, I think, with my demo. I'm already screen sharing, so everybody should see my screen. Let's do the layer sets. I think we had a couple of questions regarding the layer sets in the past. So the purpose of the layer sets is to be able to store the state of the layer stack and recall it at a single press of a button. And what's a useful use case for that, for example, is if you want to structure your show into different segments, then you have, for example, the opening segment, which starts with certain layers activated. Then you have a discussion, for example, going on with certain layers. And then you have a closing segment, for example, that has certain segments. And maybe you also have sponsorship messages in between or something. So you can set up basically your show to be run in segments. And that's why we made the layer sets. And the layer sets are in the layer stack at the bottom. So if I pull this up here, then you can see there's a space for the layer sets. And in order to demo them, I have to do a couple of things in my layer stack. I have to add a second placer layer, so I can have a second camera. So I'm putting this here, right here, and I'm selecting the second camera here. And so I have a second camera, and I can turn that on. And I should turn off the audio for that. All right, so I can turn this on and I can turn it off. And so you see me from two different angles. And let's call this one here to segment 1 of my show. So I'm setting up the layer stack to show myself and the station logo, and just saving this and going in and calling it segment 1, for example. And now I have a recall button, and it has a red button next to it to show you if this specific layer configuration is live. Let's switch the layer configuration, turn off the other placer, turn on this placer, and instead of the station logo, we'll have this annotation that I used last time for the demo for the remote control surfaces. And now I'm going to call this one making a layer stack and a layer set, and call that segment 2. So, and now I can easily switch between segment 1 and segment 2. And you will notice that this is just like pressing all the buttons on the layer stack. So there is an outro, an out animation going on if the layer turns off, and there's also in animation going if the layer is turning on. So I could, for example, do dissolve transitions. Let me keep that one. So if I press this button, there's a dissolve. In the other direction, it's also a dissolve, but it's working because this dissolve is only the placer one going off, and the one placer going off, but the other is not going on. So it looks funny if I turn this also into a dissolve. Then I'll have a cross dissolve here. So I'm gonna turn this back to cut in both cases. So it's a hard cut between those two, but still the you see the annotation comes in and goes out smoothly. So what happens if I add a new layer to the layer stack? For example, a lower third, because that's something one wants to have maybe. So we've got this lower third. And I want this be this lower third. I have to make sure that it's in the proper level in the layer stack. I want this to go on at the same time I switch to segment 1. And there's another way to be able to add this, to edit the configuration, and that's if you click on the cogwheel button settings, the settings button in the segment 1. I'll get this view, and this shows me basically what the layer configuration is that I've saved. And I see that I have a new layer here that doesn't have any action yet. So I can say I want to have it live when I click on segment 1. So let's try this. Go to level segment 2, click on segment 1, and I will have the lower third come on as well. So, but if I click back to the segment 2, it will stay on and just continue until its time is out, and it will disappear. So if we don't want this, we can edit the segment 2 also, and we can turn it to off. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to show you if I turn on segment 1, the lower third will show up. If I click on segment 2, the lower third will be turned off and it will animate out. But maybe I don't want it to animate out. I want to simply cut over to my other scene regardless of what's on the first thing. So I can force it off, and I can click on force off in this instant. And so now if I turn it on and I switch back to segment 2, it will be off immediately. So I don't have to wait for the animation to finish. So that's basically how the layer sets work. You can now also attach, create a shortcut for the keyboard, or you can use those buttons on the remote control surface, use the layer set, or turn it off and on. No, the recall button, you can put the recall button on the remote control surface. You can attach it to the show or show start or show end. So you can have automatically switch, Mimolive switch to a layer set when you start the show or when you stop the show. And there's another button down here. So if you don't want to add specific actions to all the layers, you can simply update the layer stack to reflect the current settings layer. So if I click on that now, you will see that the lower third is in fact not live anymore. So it will turn to off. And this happened here. So I have updated this layer set to reflect exactly what's in the layer stack here. All right, good. So far, so good on layer stacks.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, you know, one thing that I didn't realize is the layer sets don't have a live, not live button. It just has, it's basically one toggle. You know, hit it, it's active.
It's a
Hit
recall
something
button.
else, right? Yeah. So
it's a recall button, and that toggles all the states in the layer stack. All right, good. So, are there any questions regarding the layer sets in the question or chat room or something?
Gabriel, you were the one that asked, so post a question if you got any more.
All right, good. So my next topic I'm gonna touch on is the secret Mimo Live features, which aren't very secret because they are in the documentation, but most people don't read the documentation, and so they find these features often very late in their learning curve. So I'm gonna give you a jump ahead and give you a quick outlook of what's possible with those features. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually the multi-view feature of Mimo Live, and we have actually have two multi-views, and I'm going to show you both of them. These are the buttons up here in the right-hand upper corner that look like a little bit like column disclosures. The right-hand one is the external multi-view, and the other one is the inline multi-view, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. First of all, I'm going to set up a little bit. I have to bring in more sources. We already have two cameras, but I'm going to bring in a couple more fake sources, so I have more things to play with. Just some JPEGs that are going to represent video sources, so I'm just going to put them here. And you see they are called camera 4, caller 1, caller 2. They can be actually video sources, so it's not just JPEGs. And I'm going to upgrade the video switcher because that's that's one of the central features of the multi-view. I'm going to upgrade the video switcher to have 9 sources. So I can attach more sources down here. I'm scrolling down a little bit to the list of sources where you say C, D, E, F, G, H. These are the sources you can assign. So I'm going to assign a caller. So I may have a Mimo call here. I have 3 people call in. And I have an additional camera set up with a weather person. So I have these 6 sources basically, and once I turn this live, I can of course switch here the cameras, switch my other cameras here, and now you see I have a little lagging problem with my camera because I'm running into the CPU limits of my computer here. Let me see if I can fix that by just reconnecting to my camera. No, it's getting even worse. So I'm using this one instead. All right, so I can have switching multiple outputs here. And now I'm gonna look at the multi-view feature. Because this is a little awkward. You always have to select the video switcher layer. If you click around, your switching layers are gone. So this is probably not a good idea to use that. So we can have the multi-view. This is the external multi-view, and the external multi-view you can put, for example, on an external screen. So if you have a second screen attached to your Mac, you can put that onto the second screen. And there's a little settings wheel up here in the right-hand top corner, and that lets you select the layouts. And you might find that there's a couple of layouts that you know from standard switchers. You can have different layouts. For example, something like this, or this, or
Oliver, you know, we had a question today saying, could you drive 2 HDMI outputs? you know, with a switcher. You just did it. I said Mimo Live can do it. And yeah, you can.
All right. So yes. So I'm taking the automatic view here because that's fun, and I have 7 screens, which is the program out and my 6 sources I want to see, and I want to see the program out a little bigger. Now it's trying to fill the screen I have. The screen says, so I have to resize it a little bit to make it so it can fit all the 6 sources and the program out into this window. So I have the program out already assigned. So how do I assign more sources? There's another settings wheel here in the label. At the right-hand side of each label, there's a setting. And if you click that, you can simply select the cameras. And I can just go through all of the cameras here that I've assigned. Right. And my main camera, of course, which is back working. And what do we have? We don't have this yet, but we didn't, oh, I screwed up because we didn't assign that to the switcher. So we have to do a different one, this one. So now I have my motor view, which I can put on a second screen, and I can switch by just clicking on the images here. And also what you see is if I look at my main camera, which is an NDI PTC camera, I also have the PTC controls here. So I can directly control my PTC cameras from the motor view. And let me see if I have, yeah, exactly. So one thing, for example, I can do with a camera here is I can define, I think I showed you that before, I can define stored camera positions. So I can go and save this position 1, for example, and now I can rename it to Oliver Main, Oliver close up. So, and then I can define a second one and call that Nivo Cam in background. So. All right, so I'm gonna use the, where is it gone to? Oh, there's my motor view. Oh, I destroyed it. So I'm gonna use the other one. So now you see there's a close-up button and a Mevo Cam and background button, and I can just zoom into the camera in the background and then I can quickly go back by just clicking close up, and it will come back. So I don't know what I did wrong so that my external motor view disappeared. Maybe let's see if it comes back. Let me see if we switch it to a different layout. No. This could be a bug in this version of Mimo Live, which I'm going to report to the developers and have fixed for the final release of 5.8, hopefully. So yeah, luckily we have a backup multi-view, which works exactly like the external one, but is embedded in the main window, and you can actually use both of them at the same time. This, if you activate it, then it will show up in a new column here. And also there's a settings button, which basically gives you the same layout options. So I'm going to do an automatic layout with 7 and the first screen exposed. So I have basically the same layout I had before. Only this time the 6 sources down here are stacked. Switching back to this. And again, I can assign just my sources. And the good thing is I will see what's on the source, even if it's not used anywhere in the stack. So you can, for example, if you have a Mimo caller call in, you can look at if they are connected if a signal comes in, even if they are not used, if their video is not used anywhere else, and even if you haven't assigned it yet. So this is very useful. All right, I think that's about it for the multi-view. As I said, here in the settings, in the eye control, you now see the two buttons for the stored positions, and you can control NDI directly from within the multi-view. Good. Any questions regarding the multi-view? If you want to.
No, I just told Steve, who had the problem this morning. I think you solved it. That amounts to multiple MEs. I mean, right? You can say what goes to what screen or whatever. You can switch your output with the multi-view, right? You can say what goes to which output to which screen.
Well,
with the switcher. Yeah.
The multi-view is basically just a way to see all the sources that are coming in, and you can use it to control the switcher, which gives you the ability, this switcher layer, which gives you the ability to create an output, program output.
But there is no provision for a multiple, say, video bus, a second video bus.
Oh, no,
yeah, okay. So
not yet.
it may not be the same solution. Okay.
No. All right. So after the multi-view, the next cool thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to turn off the multi-view to save a little of my performance here. Gonna make it a little smaller. The next cool thing, I can turn it off completely. So now there's a very cool layer called the follow layer, and the follow layer is for one thing you can use it for is if you have a 4K camera and you want to just pick a 1080p area out of it and then move it around the screen to follow a person on the stage, for example. So how do we get this follow layer? We can just go and look for it in the follow. We have to write it correctly. So there's the follow layer, and the follow layer I will put it just below the station logo. I have to select a source, which will be my main camera, and then I'm already set up. I'm gonna set it up to manual, so just to get started with the easy stuff. So as you can see in the preview, it has a light area and a dark area, and the light area represents the zooming area you can use. So if I have two buttons here. One is called long shot, which gives me this complete thing, and then I have a close-up button, and the close-up button zooms in when I zoom around with the camera. And it's not live. This one is very important. If you want to show a layer, then it should be live. So now it's live. So it's going a close-up, and you see it smoothly zooming in and out. And my camera is out of sync again because I have too many cameras. I will just turn some off and give the VC150 a chance to catch up, which it almost did. All right, so now, okay, so the follow layer. All right, so now I can use my mouse to just click on the preview and zoom around. So this is, for example, easy to follow a ping pong game, for example, and just follow the ball with the mouse, and the camera will just follow automatically. And we can define the max zoom factor, so I can go and zoom in even more. And if I have a more resolution 4K camera, I can go in up to 50% and not lose any resolution. And also I have a face detection tracking mechanism. So the camera will follow my face automatically if it finds it. And whoop. And so I can keep myself in the frame even without moving the camera. So that's one of the cool things that people only discover when they've been playing around with Mimolive for a while. All right.
That's terrific.
Yeah. So let's go back to the long shot and turn it off so we are back at normal so normal operations. All right, so any questions about this?
No new questions. So.
No new questions.
Okay. Hey, we're all experts now, Oliver, thanks to these sessions.
We are progressing quickly. Let me just remove a couple of things here so we give this thing a chance to catch up with. Let's move this.
You mentioned before that which layers are really GPU and CPU intensive, like the transparency,
I can actually look
things.
At the
yeah.
I can actually look at the render performance monitor, and I see now I'm back to 11 milliseconds to render the video. So I should be able to render 3 frames in the time in the time I have to render 1. So I shouldn't have any problems now. So that's good. That's good. Yeah. The other thing I can look at is the source performance monitor, which shows me what's coming in from the camera. Right now, it's a little bit less than what should come in. But I think if I reselect it, maybe I can catch up. There's some weird, sometimes there's some weird networking things going on where if you get your video in from a Wi-Fi network, for example, then sort of packets queue up. I don't know how that works.
Well, we got a question from Dave wanting to know again where you found that the performance monitor stuff. So could you? It's on the main menu, right? That's what the things you were just showing. The performance monitor.
Yeah, the performance monitor is up here. Those 2 buttons in the. If you follow my mouse, can you see the mouse?
Yeah. Oh, they're on the right side. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the external multi-view monitor, and this is the multi-view column, which is the inline multi-view. So that's where you find those, and you should probably.
But they're also on the main menu. You can choose under Window, right? Isn't that where you found it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is that? That's the multi-view window, which is open somewhere. So. All right. So good. All right. So you tripped me up again a little bit here. So
sorry, I will not interrupt so much.
So let's do some more interesting stuff you can do with me. I am a little bit. I have a video I'd like to show, but somehow with the screen sharing going on, I'm a little bit worried that it might not work. We'll see. I just tried it. So let me go and find the video. Let me see, or did I already add that maybe in the setup? No, I did not. All right, so I'm gonna just add that to get this video here, the Halloween projection. Also might answer one of your questions, which is that I have an MP4 here, and I'm gonna drag it over to the layer stack, and I'm gonna put it on top of the layer stack. So hopefully it'll work. It's about 3 minutes. Is it okay if I show it? It's about using Mimolive for projection mapping on a
I've done this stuff.
Oh yeah, cool. So this is my brother. He did this for Halloween, and he's got a house in Austria with a lot of white walls, so he can do quite an interesting thing. And I'm trying to play that now. I hope it's not. Let me know if it works. I hope it works. It's like.
Well, we're not hearing anything. Is there audio on it?
No, yeah.
Okay.
But you will hear that when I play it. So.
Hello and welcome to this year's Halloween house projection. We are going to decorate the house with lightning and thunder. We are in the middle of the preparation. This is how the projector is set up. Next to it, there is a MacBook that renders the projection with Mimo Live. I've got an Apple AirPod connected to a speaker through its audio jack for playing the sound. The computer sends the audio stream over Wi-Fi. On the other side of the house, we've got another projector to illuminate the facade. Now let's take a look at how it's going to look at night. Now I want to provide an insight into how the projection works. I'm using our live video production software Mimo Live. I've got a video clip of our house with some wine leaves in the wind. And then there is a layer called source with distortion, which makes it possible to project the wine leaves exactly where they belong. I can move those little red handles to position the video. Of course, the best way to do that is at night right on location. Maybe you have noticed the hole in this layer. This provides space for the ghost in our window. The ghost is projected from the inside of the house. I will show you that in just a moment. And then we've got a playlist of thunder and rumble sounds, which are looped and played in shuffle mode for an endless thunderstorm. And this custom-made layer listens for the thunder sounds and produces flashes synchronized to the soundtrack. The whole projection consists of different layers, and each of them illuminates different parts of the house. Inside the house, I've got another MacBook and a loop movie of a ghost. The third projector illuminates a thin, transparent fabric in the window and produces a scary ghost effect. Thank you for watching this year's Halloween house projection. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to make one your own, try Mimo Live.
All right.
Well, in my neighborhood, you were missing a couple of MacBooks, but okay.
Yeah. All right. So yes. Where am I? Okay. So yeah, Achim didn't use one of the fun things we did for Halloween, which is a layer that's a digital puppet. And I'm going to show you that also. So you can get those additional layers if you go to the Layers Stack Plus. There's a Get More Layers button, and that takes you to a website where you can download additional things. I'm going to show you the website for a second here. Mimo Live downloads. There's a couple of things here. Let me make that look nicer. So for example, the magnifying glass spotlight layer, painter layer that allows you to paint on the screen. We've got an LED board test layer for jumbotrons, so you can find pixels, broken pixels on that thing. QR codes, source, the QR code source, a backgrounds pack for various backgrounds you can use for parties or something. And the Halloween layer pack, and that contains the layer I'm going to show you in a second. You can download, and once you downloaded that and double-clicked it, it will be loaded into Mimo Live, and you can use that. And so I've already loaded in the zombie, which is it's a digital puppet, and it has a couple of controls, and I'm going to turn it live and let it walk into my image here for a second. And while it walks in, I have two buttons I can press. One is a grab button, which makes it try to grab me. I can make it stop walking, and it can shiver, and then it can go on walking and leaving the screen on the other side of me. So that's a couple of fun things you can do with Mimo Live. Bye. What else? What else? What other fun stuff do we have? Oh, the magnifying glass. I showed you the magnifying glass, so I can show you how it works in real time, in real life. So the magnifying glass basically allows you to magnify anything that's below the layer. So I can turn it on, and that's probably not a good thing to look at. And then I can just highlight the box here for the Mevo cameras, and because my Mimo Live logo is also below the magnifying glass layer, I can also make that bigger, or my company name here, so I can highlight stuff, and of course turn it off again. So that's one of the fun layers you can download additionally. The QR code layer is actually not just fun, it's also very useful because it allows you to quickly turn any URL into a QR code. And I seem to have downloaded it, but not installed it. So I can, that's one thing I can show you. Get more layers. The process of downloading things is easy. Just get to the download here, download QR codes, oops. Download for free. So it's going to be downloaded here. I can show it in Finder. Oops, it's over here, of course. Double click it. So it will be unzipped, and then double click it again. So it will be loaded into Mimo Live. And now I have the QR codes in my list here. I don't. Why don't I? Because it's a source. Ha! It's a QR code source, so you can use it in any video, in any layer as a video, which is much better. And the QR code source, I can just type in a URL here. For example, my Mimo Live URL, and then put that on the screen, for example, in a, well, let's do a pip layer. Oops. No, I don't want to do that. Pip layer. Let's get a pip layer and select the QR codes from the sources and turn it on. And now I have a QR code which you can point your camera at, which will take you directly to the Mimo Live website. All right. So what are we on time? Do we have any questions? Are you still hearing me? I'm not hearing you. Mike, are you there? Still there? What's happening? What has happened? Let me go back.
Okay, sorry, Oliver, I was away for a second.
Oh, you were away for a second. And
yeah, sorry.
I was thinking my internet connection fell.
No.
Off the door or something.
Nothing like the host leaving in the middle.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So do we have any questions left?
Well, we have a request that you continue doing these.
Good.
Oh, Dick Lieber asked. Yeah, can you see the question? Dick Lieber is asking, are the add-ins lower thirds on our ATEM a one-time charge or monthly? The lower thirds are built into Mimo Live, right? So
there's a lower third pack. So the basic lower third is built into Mimo Live. That's absolutely right. And then there's a pack for add-on lower thirds, which is just a number of pre-built lower thirds you can easily use, which are available at additional cost. And those are not a subscription because this is too much handling for something that small. And the ATEM switcher is also not a, the ATEM controller layer is also not a subscription, but a one-time charge just for historical reasons.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a whole bunch of, you have a whole package for sporting events of score displays
Yeah,
and
the
all kinds of things, right?
sports scoring layer is a subscription. It's a very complex system for doing sports scoring, timekeeping, and all of basically sports graphics for a lot of sports: basketball, American football, soccer, hockey, and many more.
So if I didn't mention it, there's consensus here that we want to continue this. So we're going to ask Alex, and we'll figure out what time, a different time for you, because we're conflicting with a vendor here. So, you know, maybe we'll put you back on Saturdays again or something, or whatever. Let's see what you and Alex can work out. But everybody wants more of these. So stay with us. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. I think the issue is just that he needs some volunteers to run the show. this
Well, yeah, and I'll do it, but that's not the problem. Is that if they're going to have announcements every Thursday at this time, then people have to make a decision. But they're going to watch either you or them in a recording. So see if you have a popular recording on YouTube when we publish these.
Yeah. So it's good to know that this is the new thing on Thursdays is Blackmagic hour, and we can move out of their way, no problem.
Yeah, well, let's see what we can
probably
figure
a smart
out.
thing to do, even if our switches, of course, our software switcher is much more powerful than that.
Well, yeah, you don't have a 12K camera.
Yeah, actually, I think they don't have a 12K capture device yet, so I think that's the problem. So
yeah, that's what they were saying, that they, I mean, the issue being how big the files are and everything. It's going to be a challenge for everybody. But hey, I remember when they said that you won't be able to carry HD over your internet, over Ethernet, because it requires much too much bandwidth. Oh yeah, that didn't turn out to be true.
No, it's not. Yeah, and also so we so thank you everybody for joining. I think.
Thank you, Oliver. We got lots of thanks in the chat. Yeah, you can see that new chat. That's where it is, and everybody's saying thank you. So,
all right.
You are the best, Oliver. Mimo Live is the best. Let's hope it gets you a bunch of new customers. So.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope this is worth it. And even, I mean, you're welcome to come over to the Boinks forum, even if this is not going to continue. Achim and I will do probably twice a month, hopefully, or we're aiming for twice a month to do a live stream. And we take questions there as well. So and do a lot of demos. We're just not using Zoom. We stream through Facebook and YouTube. And yeah, you're welcome.
If nothing else, we bring you in every second week or once a month for the latest state of Mimo Live or whatever. Let's see what you and Alex can work out. So.
Yes.
Okay, thank you again, Oliver. Thanks everybody for sticking with us. Mickey, if you're there, are you there? You can hit it. There we go.